Okay, guys, I'm going to call the work session into to order. We have a really busy agenda tonight, so we want to get right into it. Let me get mine up here. I'm sorry, I'm starting without my stuff. First up is finance. I think there are, let me get over here to finance. There's some budget amendments in there. Any questions, or Shipper, do you have anything to say? I know one of them in there, there's a budget amendment listed for, or it's out now, and it's a TSBA, because we'll have to vote on that later. Right. It's the very first one. Well, and we won't vote on it until the
Okay.
meeting, so that's why it's on there.
So do you want to just keep it right
We'll
there?
just
or
keep
pull
it
out?
there.
Okay.
Um,
There's one more amendment that's actually attached to an agenda item further down. It is for CTE purchase of Snap-on tools, but it's actually one of those items that is more than $10,000, so we put that amendment with the actual purchase.
okay. And none of these, other than the one for the, to advertise the superintendent, is a fund balance.
Reimbursement for paper, no. Insurance damage, nope.
Okay.
Title 1A, no. Within funds. Pretty sure none of the other ones are. Yeah, none of the other ones are.
Okay. Any questions about budget amendments? So we can put them on consent once we talk about the other as well. Okay. All right, monthly financials, do you have any questions about that? All right.
Ms. Kinzer?
Yes.
Before we move on to new business, if looking down at 3.8, talking about the use of the logo for Inspiring Minds, that's to Murray County school teachers. They have parent-teacher conferences later this afternoon, and they're here. Could we move them up?
Come
Beautiful.
on. Yeah,
All right,
let's
perfect.
talk about it. Absolutely.
I'm gonna pull up a chair. I've been on my feet all day. Hi, I'm Jennifer Fleming, and I'm the owner of Inspiring Minds Learning Center. I'm also a second grade teacher at Brown Elementary. And we have started a tutoring business to help parents get the extra help they need after school. We currently have 7 teachers who are tutoring. We have a certified dyslexia specialist, and we're offering it for parents who are trying to help, because y'all, let's be honest, some of this math, as parents, it's hard to help. And so we have people who are already teachers in the school system who can help without staying after school. They can go to the business, and we just kind of connect each other. And what we're asking is to use the Murray County Public School logo just to show support, show that we kind of have the stamp of approval. Parents want to go where they know it's trustworthy, and seeing that logo, they trust that. And with us being educators we're educating every child for life, sometimes it goes beyond the school hours. So we're just asking for approval to use the logo.
Okay, I'm the one that asked to put it on the agenda because I did get some calls about it. So have you given this opportunity to all teachers to be able to, how much do you charge an hour?
For tutoring?
Uh-huh.
It's $40 for an hour and $45 for dyslexia therapy.
So can any teacher apply, or did you just?
Well, right now, I am in the teaching full-time. It's kind of hard to do. It's finding the location for it. I have a building right now. We've already outgrown that.
Mm-hmm.
So if teachers want to apply, they're more than welcome to. I have put it out on Facebook, and I've had several ask about it. But like even high school teachers right now, they have asked, but I've not had parents call for high school teachers just yet. Right now, it's reading and math.
I just want you to understand the reason we're talking about it, because we're pretty careful about that. And not that I don't think that you're
right,
but we even had a church that wanted to use our logo, and we really gave a lot of discussion about that, because that just incorporates everybody, and it's important. And so that's why I brought it here, because I did not remember us having that discussion as a board. So,
Okay.
I'll open it up to you all, and I don't know whose light was first,
I
but
would.
Ms. Morency.
Is this a for-profit business?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I can't support us putting our I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, I think
Mhm.
it's a great thing. I just can't see us putting our logo on a for-profit business, because then it's setting a precedent for other for-profit businesses coming to us, and I don't even know, is that legal for us to do?
It is.
Jake's behind you.
Yes, but it does create a little bit of a precedent. You're exactly right. It is legal, it can be done. If you're leaning toward doing it, I would recommend some kind of license agreement where you license that intellectual property out. That would give you the right to terminate it if things weren't going the way that you thought it was going, or should be going. But yes, it's legal, but it does open you to, up to some free speech issues. If you license it to one for-profit, you have to be careful if you choose not to license it down the road.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I guess the question I would have is, how do you bring some parity to this if someone else were to ask? I mean, my assumption is if we're saying that it's aligned with the keys, who is actually checking that on our side? And again, sorry, this has more to do with inside than you. So, my question is somebody on staff now checking to make sure that the curriculum, or however it's being done, is actually aligned to what's being said? And I'm just not sure if that's something we need to get into as a district, as far as, having to have somebody look that over.
Any other questions? Excuse me, I can't see.
Well, I didn't have it turned on yet. What would be and I see what I'm reading right here, but what would really be the ultimate purpose of having a logo? Having this logo specifically? For
Support.
business purposes?
Support. Because when you're going into a tutoring business, you want it to be from someone you trust, and it's made up of Murray County teachers.
I guess that's where, because I hear the concerns too about, it's almost like we're picking and choosing businesses. Now, I think you guys are the only one.
We are the only one in well, you have the Boys and Girls Club,
Right.
but you have to pay to go to the Boys and Girls Club to get the
But as far
tutoring.
as private tutoring, you guys are the only one, if I'm not mistaken.
We are.
If I were to open up a second one, would I be able to use the logo as well?
You could come here and ask.
So I think that's where we get into the question of picking and choosing. I do think that it's very valuable, and it's a huge selling point that you do have Murray County licensed teachers.
Oh, yeah.
I think that should be something that's on all the marketing, all your publicity, everything. I just don't think the logo is the avenue to make that effectively and, fairly across the board. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Moore?
So, if it were me, I would explore as much of what he's saying about utilizing, there's nothing stopping you from definitely advertising that we're all teachers and we're very familiar with what goes on in these schools. I would explore as far as you can, stretch that as far as you can. But as far as the logo itself, I think it's probably, from a board standpoint, so I wouldn't think it would be a wise choice on our side.
Any other discussion? All right, so I'll just leave this on the agenda as new business, if we need to vote on it or whatever, huh?
For the full meeting, I wouldn't see why it would need to go.
I don't see why it would.
Unless anyone on the board wants to move it there.
If you all, anybody wants to move it there for a vote, okay. All right, thank you. Next is, curriculum instruction, budget priorities, all right. Mr. Moore. Huh? No, I asked you about them, but we'll go back. Did you have any question on the financials? All right. Mr. Sam?
I was just curious, are we, all the reds, greens, and yellows look good to me, but I can't tell if I just wanted to know if we're on track, if you think we're where we should be at this time of year. based on our expenditures and how much we have left.
So the formatting that's on the sheet is going by the number of months that we're into. So just because an account code is coded in red, for the revenues, it's something that's projected behind, and then, on the expenditure is something that's projecting ahead of the number of months that we're at. Just because something's projecting further doesn't mean it's necessarily gonna go over budget, it's just the spending patterns, 'cause some departments spend all the money upfront. Something I do have to say, there's certain departments in here that keep up with their budgets really well, so they know what they're doing, and so they'll submit budget amendments as they're going. So some of the stuff that you see where we're fluctuating maybe between line items is that. Now, are we gonna project over budget? There's a possibility, 'cause we budgeted quite a bit of attrition, and we don't know for sure if that attrition that we budgeted and made cuts all across the board to give raises is actually gonna play out the way we hoped it would. That's something that, I think Doug did some projections recently, and, I can write down and ask him to send those out to see if we expect the teacher salaries budgets to be over this year or not. Because I think we made bigger cuts than we've ever done before, or since, well, that was our first budget, so I can't say it since I've been here. But, just saying overall what we did is not something that, you know, we were saying, okay, this is a good practice, but it's a moving document, and like I said, like, if something is projecting right now, doesn't mean it's gonna stay like that. Just because once May hits, the expenditures fall big time. And so those last 2 months, we don't really see a lot of activity, and coming up over here pretty soon, we're gonna cut off purchasing anyway. We need to pick up on a date on that and send it out and communicate, so you will see the spending drop here in another month or so. But I'm gonna make a note, I know he did some numbers for, he may have actually spoken to some board members about it, but I'll have him maybe send it out to the whole board so you can kinda see his estimate of where we could end up if the spending continued the way it is.
I have one question. With regards to the issues with deductions and, the meetings that y'all have had, I don't know, I thought that it was said either at the meeting or maybe in the paper, I don't know if it's accurate, about anyone that's left the system that, we're not gonna be seeking to get those funds back, or how is that being handled?
Part of that is true, because we cannot recuperate from somebody who doesn't get a paycheck from the district anymore. But when their W-2Cs were done, that amount of money that we are recuperating from, that was added on top for their taxes, did increase their gross wages. So their box one on the W-2C was increased, so they did, those employees, even though the district's picking it up, those employees did end up paying taxes on it. But as far as recuperating, according to the IRS research that Doug did, we cannot recuperate money from somebody who's not our employee anymore because they don't have a paycheck. So part of it is true, the other part that was not discussed is these people did pay federal taxes on those amounts, because we could not necessarily say, hey, you owe us money for taxes, because that's something we've gotta turn over to the, IRS when we do the 941X. But their federal wages was increased to cover that amount, so they paid federal tax on it.
I understand that part of it. I guess, I'm just wondering how we as a district can essentially discriminate between teachers that were working last year and some that have continued to work, and so we're saying we're gonna take money from you because you continue to work for us, but somebody who did the same job, worked in the same school, but decided to retire or move to a different job or whatnot, that we're saying, well, we can't, I mean, I don't know how much money we're talking about.
We had 218 people that had left the district in 2019. I don't have the figures in front of me to say this is the exact amount, but like I said, all those people did end up counting that amount of money as wages. So we didn't just give them like, okay, you got a free paycheck in a way, you know, it's like that was added to their gross wages for them to pay federal taxes on it. But, and I know you said you got that, but, we had 2 days turnaround to get W-2Cs out, so I think Doug did the best case scenario that he had to communicate to everybody and stop from chaos. But yeah, we discovered on Tuesday that this had happened, Tuesday before the 31st, And Friday morning on the 31st, everybody was coming to Central to pick up the W-2Cs. So, as far as the IRS guidelines go, it stated that it is, even if the employer did something like this is still a benefit that you will receive when you retire. So your Medicare and your Social Security contribution is your responsibility as well. This is not, I think he emailed some of those links out in the big emails that he sent everybody, so that's why he was trying to communicate that in a 2 days worth of time, I don't think we had a lot of options. And the second part of all this would be, if we said every employee that the district's gonna pay for it, we would have to have another set of W-2Cs, because then you're changing their income for 2019. So I know that when we had our meeting with the teachers, with the MCEA, that MCEA wants to bring up some other options to help the teachers who do work here still, to try to recuperate the cost in a way, or help them in a way. But that's something I think when Jennifer presents it to us that we'll see. But like I said, yeah, I think it was all a matter of what can we do in 2 days worth of time to turn around and produce 2,000 more documents that are correct and accurate than what was already halfway out.
Okay.
Ms. Morency?
So this money, is coming out of our fund balance?
No. So, last year, a lot of this money is based off of deduction codes that was retirement accounts. So these are codes that pretty much the people who got affected the most were the ones that were putting the most amount of money in retirement accounts.
But the ones that are no longer working for the school district?
This money will it will hit the expenditure accounts. We will not be touching the fund balance without the board's approval, of course.
Well, I understand that,
Yeah,
but
but we
where
have-
else is it gonna come from?
It's the expenditure line for Social Security and Medicare. That's where it's gonna hit, depending on how much we have remaining in those lines. It'll just go from there of, do we have enough budget to pay district portion and employer portion? Because 50% of that money is employer portion, so it will be recouped back from employees' checks.
Okay,
The
but the
other
other 50%.
Percent will hit the BOE, because that was the district portion, employer portion of Social Security and Medicare.
But eventually, that money that, if we didn't use it, would have gone into fund balance. So
Correct.
actually, it's coming out of our fund balance.
If-
Well, it may not come out of the fund balance line, but it's
Yes.
costing the district money to do it.
Well, I mean, it's benefits that we were obligated to pay in the first place, huh? Yeah, we would have paid it last year, so that's what,
But
it's money that,
But for the ones that aren't,
yes, those 218 people,
okay,
that is
I would like
correct.
to know what that figure
Okay.
is. It's what it's gonna cost the
And
the
I know
district.
Doug's got all that stuff,
Okay.
since we had to redo those specific W-2s separately.
Just for clarity, I'd like to know what
And
that amount is.
There's been a couple of other questions, because we literally, honestly, receive probably 30 to 40 emails from teachers every day right now in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And our office is trying to stay on top of it, trying to make sure, and if you all have anybody who has a crazy question, because we've gotten some questions that have been like, well, from what we've heard, the money that was not paid for Social Security and Medicare was earning interest. But the other part of all this is, no, your tax deduction was not, your deduction code was not set up correctly, so that money was actually coming to the employees in paycheck. So, yeah.
I just wanted to know what it's gonna cost the district, and I would like a figure on that.
And like I said, I will, I know Doug discussed some of this stuff when we had the teachers, because of course the teachers who work here were really upset about having to pay when the teachers that have left don't have to pay. But legally, I don't know if we have, and he's been talking to a CPA firm, it's like, I don't know how we can make somebody pay who doesn't work for us anymore.
He told the financial management, we've gone through all this there as well tonight, and he told them he can't legally go and.
The IRS had two
yeah.
options, I think, on their website, and we went with the best of the two, I think, this is the best thing we can do right now. Like I said, when we did amend their W-2Cs, but other than that, as far as, that's the only reporting thing that we had left in our control that we could change. Because I think, like we've had in the past, even people who were paid wrong in the previous 2-3 years ago, I don't think we billed them, and we told them that you've been informed that you owe the district money, but I don't know a lot of people that actually come back and.
Are we doing that in this case?
The 218 people, as far as I know, go ahead, Jake.
I mean, yeah, we've written letters before. The board just chose not to sue. I mean, there were some instances where employees got checks for time that they had not worked, and we wrote letters and tried to get them to voluntarily do it. There were some that did voluntarily repay. There were some that did not, and the board chose to take no further action on that. So, I mean, could you file a lawsuit? Potentially. I mean, I think what the IRS is saying, that you have a limited number of ways that you can recoup by withholding from an existing employee's account. Would it be a good idea to sue ex-employees for a mistake that maybe we made? That's something the board will have to decide, but I think that would be a tough sell to get a judge to agree with us that the exit. But I do understand the discrepancy there. The current employees are having to pay and the exes are not, but I still think that would be a hard sell to try to recover through the courts.
Mr. Moore?
I guess the question I would have to my fellow board members is, do we wanna, 'cause I know we've talked about this in the past with other mistakes, do we at least need, as a board, for some equalness to actually send those letters out? And I know we have limited options as far as forcing it, but, is it reasonable for us to at least send a letter out informing of it and request that the overpayment, 'cause again, these were overpayments at the end of the day.
Right.
But then again,
They got the money a year, had it.
I guess the other problem with that is if we do that, then that also is now, if anything they do pay back goes back and now corrects their
The W-2C
W-2
is already
again.
gone.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like a cycle.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It's pretty bad.
And there's a transactional cost to that also, determining how
True.
much per employee and then the fees associated with getting all that out, so.
Our
and
average cost is like 160 an employee, and like I said, that's averaging, so, it's all based off the employees that had higher retirement accounts. We have employees that literally have like maybe $10 a month, just because they have a very low amount of retirement, but then we have employees, the highest amount I had for one payroll was $60 for somebody, and I had 2 people on the January 15th payroll who was in that situation because they had really high amounts of retirement. So, that being said, it's varying, but the 218 employees, like I said, I hate that, I think I have the document on my computer, but I feel more comfortable letting Doug send it out to y'all, so that way you have the most accurate information. And like I said, I've made a note, so I'll have him send out the actual numbers for the 218 people.
Ms. Parker?
I just wanna say, I think it's important though for teachers and the community and everyone to know, I mean, we did not have a decision in this. I mean, those decisions were made by your office as to, and I assume in consultation with our attorney, but I don't know.
I was actually off on the day this was
Lucky
discovered.
you.
No, I was not.
I'm
Personal
sorry.
information, but my mother-in-law went through a double mastectomy that week
Sorry.
before, and so it was like, I got the phone call, so I'm sitting there with a physical therapist with a laptop in my hand, so I was like, I cannot believe this is going on right now, but anyways, that's beside the point, but I think, I don't know who all he called that day to consult. I don't know if he spoke with Jake. I don't know he went to the IRS website. I know he's got CPAs double checking everything. They did say that the W-2s and the W-2Cs that we have done are correct, but they're still gonna review it all before they give us a final report. But when we explained the logic of what we're doing to them, they said that at least what was done, we didn't have to redo any of that, at least. So it's all out. And what people had, now that's when we did not send out any more communication saying, don't file your taxes. Like, everybody was at least good to go ahead and start filing their taxes. But, this is gonna be, something that Doug would have to answer.
I guess maybe we could just have like a discussion on it at the board meeting, just to
Okay.
I mean, I didn't attend the meeting with the teachers, and I know he sent some information out to us on it, but, I just feel like, it impacts our budget. It
Yeah,
impacts our bottom line, and
I
we
think-
just really weren't, I mean, we're gonna potentially have a budget amendment that comes to us that we as a board are going to have to be behind, but it's kinda like, when somebody offers a salary to somebody and they've signed a contract and we're in a position where we've got to go ahead and pay them that salary, I mean, it's not a permission thing, it's a forgiveness
And
thing, and that's where I just want us to have a full understanding of what exactly the the process was, since it does impact all of our
Yeah, he
schools.
presented at the last board meeting and, you know, kind of explained everything at that board meeting, so I think he wasn't thinking there was more questions left, so that's why he's not here today. He's at the full commission meeting, otherwise we would've swapped and he would've been here, but, yeah, I think he's explained it, he had to explain it tonight to the financial management board, like as Ms. Kinzer said too, so I will let him know to we'll put it back on the, board agenda for the next meeting.
And he may have spoken to Daniel, but I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know.
And I just echo that. I know Ms. Morenzi asked it, and I think that's important. That number that this is costing the district, I would like to hear it. When we talked about last time about having a kind of a wrap-up report of what the impact is here, and I absolutely would like to know what the district is absorbing based on this error and what it's gonna cost the people of the county.
I'm making notes, so we will have as much information as we can get out, and like I said, we'll put it back on the agenda for next, board meeting to discuss even further.
And let me just add something too, 'cause I was at the meeting and, as was Scott Lindsay, and honestly, I think teachers are as upset over the last 3 years and their sick days and everything and not being able to see them, know them, be accurate, all of that. I think Scott and Doug both did a good job in reassuring them that they're working together to audit them. And Scott showed another new way to do it. He, I think, is going to help in gaining trust. Because you and I know, we know that HR is a pretty important position, really important for the school, because they calculate the salary based on what we say. They sign you up for insurance and annuities and all of those things that come out of your paycheck. Then they have to tell payroll what your paycheck is. They've got to keep up with sick days, and those are money in the bank for teachers because you calculate your years of experience from that, and many other things. So HR is a vital position, and I do think that Scott is going to really help us in gaining some trust back from our teachers that the things are being taken. Are there still some out there that don't have their salaries calculated correctly? It's possible, but they're checking them. They're checking them so that we can so that we get everything right. And I think that even sitting at financial management with Gwen Evans beside me, and Gwen Evans was saying, we're more upset about the sick days than anything else, because it just is a matter of just things over since all these years, things are just not right. One thing here, one thing there, it all kind of accumulated. And, this has happened. Human error. He's taken full responsibility for it. He has been forthcoming on everything. He was with the financial management. He will be with us again. And he was with the teachers, and some of them were extremely upset. And he stood up there and took it as he should. But I think we do need to know what it's going to cost us, because
Yeah, we're waiting for the CPA firm to review everything and all of the budget amendments, and if we have to do budget amendments and all those information, I think that's what the holdup is at this point. And so there will be a, follow-up report on everything like the total cost, of course, is out there. It's been in the newspaper, but how it's gonna be split up between the different categories of employees. We had to meet with the day we discovered this. 2 days after that, we had the federal state auditors on site for 142 fund, and so that was a nice conversation with Marian Dursky, and, and so we explained to her what's going on, and she said, well, as long as you have a plan and you can explain that plan in the audit, so that's something that we had to go through with the federal programs as well, which happened to be that week that we discovered all this. So we're trying to get, like you said, trying to get as much communication out, because we still had employees coming up today to the office that are having a hard time understanding what the difference is between the W-2 and the W-2C. They expect all the information, all boxes to be filled on a W-2C that were filled on the W-2. So we're literally sitting down one at a time, and we had a bunch of people after the meeting that we had with teachers to actually come up, and they set up appointments with 4 or 5 of us. And so, we've actually got to know a lot more teachers during this process. So that's been the good part, is there's a lot of them who now actually have my cell phone number, or, they come up to the office and they're like, hey, I'm locked out, hey, we've got 20 people in the office, and so, you know, we split it up and we're like, hey, you know, come on up here. And it's usually, honestly, there was really upset people at the meeting, but mostly everybody that's come to the office has been very nice, and as long as you can explain what happened, they've been very cordial, and nobody has been like really upset. They're like, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm like, hey, we're here to help, and whatever we can explain, you know, so.
Chris, you might can appreciate this. We had several coaches that came to the meeting upset about how their stipends are being paid. I don't ever remember that ever coming through us, that they would be paid quarterly, and, you know, that was kind of, I know you've had to deal with that as well, but, interesting. And their contracts, right. Well, okay.
You talking about sports, written contracts for sports? Well, they actually all got contracts this year.
Okay.
And I talked to Mr. Lindsay, about how we can do the contracts better
Yeah,
from what we did in the
Scott was
previous.
there, he spoke to that.
Yeah, so they all got contracts this year, they all signed off on them, so that was something that we implemented in. That's something that I wanted to see and suggest as well, so, and then, of course, the quarterly payments is a whole nother story for another day. Y'all don't have that much time.
I know it. Thank you. All right, anything else about this, we'll move on. David asked for budget priorities.
Okay, since I know we had talked about some committees early on, and that kind of hasn't happened as well, but I just wanted my fellow board members to have some considerations. I know every year we talk about, when it comes to the budget process, we kind of have probably some things in our mind, or maybe some things we said off the cuff. I think it would be reasonable for board members to kind of have some discussions on what they consider their non-negotiables when it comes time to have budget discussions. The things that we as a group have decided shouldn't be cut out. I know over the last few years, when things get tight, we start cutting out textbooks. And just for me personally, this year, that's not a negotiable thing. That is not gonna be something I'm willing to take out, to line item out if we have to start making any kind of cuts there. So, I would be open to any other board members that wanna either put that in here at this work session, or submit those to their superintendent or to the rest of the board for discussion. But I just wanna kinda get that going. There may be other items that anybody else has. That's one of mine. The other one I had was...
Okay.
The other one I had was just, you know, we just had the digital devices. We'll have some more discussions about that. But properly funding that this year, it would be a high priority for me as well.
All right, and I'll just piggyback before I call on you too. And when I had something putting on the agenda, I have some things to give you all about that, just for discussion tonight. So that would be just something we need to be thinking about that I think is non-negotiable as well. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll address that when it comes to it. Mr. Howell.
So I agree with David Moore. Those are two things, textbooks and technology, I think are two things we need to invest in. I think the third thing, I think you'll agree, is teacher salaries. Or employee, not just teachers. I think we do need to look at a raise this year that's for everyone. That'd be a nice raise.
Thank you, and I'll have more on that later in the agenda. Any other, and he's absolutely right. We always, you know, one of my big things that I never have understood is why if 87% of your budget is your personnel, then the last thing we consider is what to do about how to help our personnel. Our teachers haven't gotten, they got a 1% raise, they got like a 0.1% raise the year before, 3% before that. So they haven't gotten their cost of living up to this point, and then the cost of living on top of that. So, I won't preach now. I'll preach a little while later in the meeting when I can show you some figures. But, Mr. Fulbright.
Yeah, I just got a couple questions, since this will be my first fun time of this side of the budget. Will we have an opportunity to talk to, department heads? If we see one department that has a huge increase, will we have the opportunity to talk to those?
Absolutely.
When will we get the budget document itself?
We will get, the first budget meeting is that one that's scheduled for us to whatever it's gonna be, our capital request and cafeteria. And I don't have my...
Okay, I don't...
Okay, and then after that, the next meeting would be the first time we see a proposed budget. And then you will get everything all in one, you know, sent to you that you can look at. And actually, last year, I sat down, as I think Mr. Beaver did too, and we sat down and actually found an error of $450,000 in one department. It is important that we all look at it because it's our budget. And and I don't wanna come to the end and say, okay, well, we've looked at this, but like we did last year, we could only eke out a 1%.
And we do have the say over what gets cut and what does not get cut.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Right.
very much.
Anyone else? Okay, then Donna, I'm gonna let you go next since this is instruction.
We had a technology meeting today, and, just wanna bring you up to date on some of the things that we discussed. All the leases are paid, so we have, 3,162 total devices that, are all paid for, 2,500 student, and the rest, 662 are teachers', devices. There are, a few schools that do not, have, all of their teachers don't have devices, laptops. So, we're looking, I know we had talked about, that was one of our priorities, was making sure that all of our teachers had their devices that they needed. And, so those schools are, the 3 schools in Spring Hill, Cox is missing a few, Whitthorne, Riverside, McDowell, Mount Pleasant Elementary, Mount Pleasant Middle School are missing a few, and all of the unit schools. So, there are 160 teachers that need devices, and, they're looking at, for a total, it's, to purchase those is about $115,000. We did, approve the $750,000, and of that, the $575,000 we purchased, we paid the lease payment, in the final payment on the lease. So that left us with $175,000, and if we, okay this $115,000, that will leave us with $60,000 and that was for, not only, individual devices, teachers' devices, but other technology in the classrooms. They also suggested, so just be thinking about this, that, these are for the teacher, devices, that, we recycle through 3-year, program, 33%, each year, and that we put $160,000 to keep those done in the budget. And they are also, we came to a consensus that we, would really like to go across the district 2-to-1, and, they are putting together a plan for our schools and how we would implement that plan to go 2-to-1 in the classrooms.
Any questions for Ms. Morency?
Yeah.
Mr. Beaver?
Yeah, did I understand you to say that unit schools were missing?
Not all the teachers have laptops. Now, some teachers have the old desktops and things like that, so, but, we are looking to, if we purchase these, every teacher, in the district will have a laptop. And
Okay, how about students and unit schools?
we are looking to go 2-to-1 across the district. That's what they're coming up with a plan.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions for Ms. Morency? All right, that's a really good, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. You can tell him, whoever's sitting next to me, I never even see.
Ms. Morency, I don't know that this would actually, I don't know that y'all are talking about this aspect, but, in thinking about the budget and planning, I'm wondering, have we given any consideration to the smart boards or the Promethean boards? It's my understanding some of those are getting older, wearing out, parts are...
Yes, and they're working on those, and that $60,000 that we have left are some of the funds that they're going to look to replace or purchase or whatever, but that'll be part of the plan.
Okay.
Okay, if I could kind of piggyback on that. I think part of what we have talked about in that committee is to not think of this as just this, when we finally come up with a budget figure to do this, it should not be just how much does it cost to put devices 2-to-1. It really encompasses, Ms. Parker, exactly what you're talking about, other technology that it should be included in what this is, and making sure that that is being approached. We actually talked again as well as about making sure staffing is covered. Something that honestly until this evening that I hadn't considered was, You know, for example, when you have, Title devices that are put into schools, although those may be covered under title funds, somebody has to support those devices, which in reality adds a cost to the district to have to support those. And it's several hundred devices from what I was told. I mean, literally, and I think when they ran the numbers, I mean, that's almost one person supporting all those devices, one thing. And I think I'm rounding there, obviously.
Is that 1,037 to 1?
Oh, wow. So, but it's a pretty high rate on that. But the point being that there's some costs like that in my opinion, when we talk about this dollar figure we're talking about, it's going to make sure it's covering technology on the whole, not just these devices. It's making sure that we're meeting the technology needs, whether it be those whiteboards, what other kinds of technology we as a district decide we're utilizing, it should be encompassing all of that.
Any other questions, Ms. Ferenczi? Okay, then next is right sizing. And Dr. Woodard's not here, but he's given you a proposal, and I'd like for you all to look at something as well. So I'm going to take one and pass it down. If you'll take one and pass it, and I'll send some over there. And I'm not saying what to do. I really think there are really good things in his proposal, and I know that Mr. Howell met with him the other day, which I think is great. I really like the very first page of it as well, because what all of this involves is we are in a critical time. We cannot attract teachers, you know, and we're going to send Scott Lindsay out to recruit teachers, so we need to give him all the tools that are necessary. Now, let me tell you what you're looking at. The first page of this is a report that was sent to the state in October. And you can see down there the list of how many teachers are at every school. And I want you to look down at Culleoka. It says 64. It's the last figure on the left. Now, and what I'm wanting you to see, that in November, Ms. Parker asked for an accounting as well. How many teachers, the same sort of thing. Well, they don't match. And look at Culleoka. It says there's 50. When the report you're looking at first is what we send in for the $200 apiece for teachers for the BEP funds that we get. Okay, so that's what that report is for. Every principal sends in a signed thing as to how many teachers they are supervising. And I've seen them, that's what the principals have put down on this report. But yet this report is different. So if we're talking about right sizing, we got to get figures straight. So the last page in this, the last page. The ones in yellow are the title schools. So you can see the ratio of the ones that are on the second report, the one Ms. Parker received, and then the ratio that's on the BEP monies report. They're different. So I think we need to have some sort of correct accounting if we're going to do some right sizing, come up with a figure. If you'll look, for instance, where it is over and under, where the average is 1463, well, Battle Creek, McDowell, Mount Pleasant, Riverside, and Woodard are over, according to that. But on the BEP report, same thing, isn't it? But it gives an entirely different number of teachers. So I just want us to do this in such a manner that we do it right and we know what we're doing, and that we don't penalize a school or, you know, for having positions that they don't, or for having more than they do. And that's all this is for information. You understand question? I don't know, Mr.
I mean, not questions as much. I mean, I guess I'll go back to, the presentation that Mr. Woodard had put together. And I can understand what you're saying about making sure the number's correct. I mean, that's kind of a given for me. We need to make sure that's correct. But I think we need to do something, to address this.
I'm not saying this because I'm not trying to
Sure.
say don't right size. I do. I absolutely agree.
And I know looking at this, I mean, I know he gave kind of some options. And I think he presented this to us previously and kinda went through, you know, the one-size-fits-all thing that kinda doesn't seem like a good fit. And obviously, I think looking at a model, but I guess.
I left off page 4 that I didn't tell you what that was. Let me just say that, I'll interrupt you just a minute.
Sure.
That is the positions and the number of students that we had in 2011 and 12. And we actually had more teachers then. Okay? With less students.
Yeah, but, I mean, what I'm saying is that doesn't.
I'm just saying that we've kind of looked at right size and it said we've kept adding positions, and we've gotten to this point, we've got too many teachers, so we need to right size. Well, that's really not the case.
Well, just because they had more teachers in 2011 and 2012, that doesn't mean that they were right-sized then. They could have been way, way over.
No,
and,
I'm not
you know,
saying that at all, but I just want us to be, if we have less teachers now than we have, then we have done some right sizing, we have more students.
Well, I know that the elementary schools, they have a formula, and I know it's easier for them, but they have a formula that they have to stick to. I don't see why we don't have a formula for our middle schools and our high schools. So I'm not saying, I don't know who's over, who's under, whatever, but I think there should be some kind of formula that we do, so, because I know our elementary schools are doing it now.
And, you know, elementary is so different, because you could have, you could say, 20 kids, that's what, you know, you need in the elementary class, but you have 90 show up. So you gotta hire another position, you know, and then divide them by those.
Absolutely.
It's very fluid in elementary. And I do think something, I'm not saying that, I didn't bring this up to say it doesn't, and I'm open to it, but I just want us to be correct.
Well, I know, I'm sorry, Mr. Woodard's not here on this,
Right.
but, clearly there's nothing to vote on this at this meeting. But I would like for him to come back and us to keep exploring this further. If we need to get more accurate numbers, if what you're showing is showing that the numbers aren't correct, I'm not sure how that changes, clearly we need the numbers to start with, but, I think it's clear to me that we need to do something to make sure we're controlling as a district what our costs are from a payroll standpoint. And honestly, I think this, to me, it trickles over a little bit into, doing a more efficient job at our schools themselves, of making sure that with the given resources we have, that we're choosing what are the best classes, what are the best options, which course offerings are we actually going to have to make sure we are utilizing our resources to the maximum. And if there's no limit on that, or if there's no check or balance on that at all, it kind of spread out over an entire district. I think it snowballs out of control.
So, there are a couple of things going on here. Currently, the way we hire is we wait until August and we say, oh, we got more kids, we gotta hire some more teachers. Do you think we're getting the best teacher in August that we would have gotten if we hired him in May or June or July? No, we're getting what's left over, and I hate to say that, but we're not getting the best teacher. So, they actually produce a projection of how many students are going to be in these schools in the next August. We don't use that list. That's just we just produce it to produce it. So if we had a formula put in place and we can use that projection to say, hey, this is May, we need, it looks like we're going to need another teacher for this school based on the projections, then we can hire sooner and get a better teacher, because we know they're looking for jobs by the end of the school year, typically. So it would help our hiring processes, and it would help the quality of teachers if we knew we could hire sooner rather than later. And Mr. Moore's absolutely right. It goes to the efficiency of operation. We have a lot of teachers. It's 87. Our entire human resources is 87% of our budget. So every 1% of increase that we want to give our employees is $1.3 million, roughly, I think is what it was last year.
No, it's $750,000. No, it
if we
is.
just pulled out teachers maybe, but it was like
No,
one.
it's for everybody.
Okay, I think it was more than 750,000.
No.
Text.
Ask him.
Because I think it was like 1.2 million per percent we go up. So, that's a huge impact. But we have to make sure we're utilizing our resources efficiently.
Well, all of this is, yes, to give Scott the tools to recruit teachers and everything. It's all this is tied in together. Right sizing, beginning salary, teacher salary, all of that. Yeah, it will cost money to do that, but we're not gonna get very far unless we do. That's, to me, we've got to do something to make sure.
About 800,000, you said.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the step raises might have been close to that. The step would be, the step is totally separate from the 800, yeah.
Which was really what we got in monies from the state, and the 1% was just, you know, if you took the 70% of that. Okay, any other comments about this? So we're not voting on this at this time, Ms. Parker, sorry. There you are.
I guess the one question I would have is, how is it that we have a document that was sent to the state on 10/29/19 that's different from what was sent to me on 11/1, 3 days later?
I'd have to ask Dr. Woodard that question. I can't answer that question.
I saw him today, and I told him that I thought some of the figures were not right, and I didn't really have a chance to talk to him about it, and I thought he'd be here tonight, so,
Are you confident then that the information that was sent to the state is the correct one? I mean, 'cause I assume when we report to the state, you're double checking those numbers.
Well, if a teacher doesn't receive their VEP money, we'll find out, and nobody has complained to us that they haven't gotten their $200.
I'm pretty confident because I went and looked at the sheets where, for instance, Penny Love turned in how many teachers she had, and it was that amount on this sheet. Now, I didn't check all of them.
So are we relying, I guess my question is, are we relying upon instructions numbers based off of what principals tell us? Are we relying on HR's numbers? Where's the communication between those two departments? Because I think that's something that if we are gonna get to the point where we wanna talk about right sizing, we can't right size with HR not knowing what instruction's doing and vice versa. And I think that's been a huge problem for a long, long time, but particularly in the last, well, while we had certain people in certain positions.
So when we have these discussions in executive, HR, curriculum and instruction, myself, special education, pupil services, we were all in the room together when we had those conversations. With just receiving this document tonight, I can't answer the questions without having the conversation with Dr. Woodard.
And I'll be honest with you, I did not work on this or anything in order to say, you got this right. I'm looking at this board and saying, we're gonna have to make a decision at some point as to what we feel like a high school, a middle school, an elementary school, and what that ratio should be. Okay? And we need to make an educated decision about it, and then, you know, and I have looked at Williamson County, I've looked at Wilson County, I've looked at all of them, they're all different, do it different, you wouldn't believe it. And I would challenge you to do that. You only have to go online and see what their ratio is for high school, middle, elementary. It's pretty easy to see. You get good figures, then you know that this is the way, if this is what we say it's gonna be, you're right, Ms. Morency, this is what we need to do. But we're looking at a lot of things that we're gonna talk about tonight. How we're gonna pay our principals. Are we gonna do it in a different way rather than by staff or by amount of students? A really good discussion to have. So I think all these things play into that, is to try to get it right. Okay? Anything else? All right, moving on. Zoning and facilities. It's you, Mr.
Good evening. I just wanted to clarify on that. We're just moving this to the next month's meeting. No, it's not gonna be on, there's nothing for this on the actual full agenda for the board.
I don't know that he was asking for us to vote on that yet, I think. And one other thing that you have to enter into is, you know, we're in the process of going through, you know, looking for a new superintendent, someone with the vision. We're gonna ask everybody about what they want, the attributes and so forth. And so they may have something to offer in this. you know, they may have something that they're doing that's working, or they know what's not working. So that's just something to think about. Okay, Mr. Perriman, I will shut up.
Good evening. We have quite a bit of information to give you tonight, so I'm gonna be brief, but I am gonna take the liberty to say two things right on the front end, and y'all gave me a microphone, which may have been dangerous at times. First off, please remember Murray Ring. Murray is our maintenance supervisor. His mother passed during the night last night. He's been with us for 40 years. Maintenance building's actually named after his father. He's a very dedicated employee, and they've had a hard time with this, so please keep them in your thoughts. And secondly, I'm gonna say this as a certified employee, as a licensed employee on the classified side, and I say this not to do this for my people or to raise the ire of my fellow certified people. Please remember classified folks when you look at salary. I promise you, they are woefully underpaid, much more so than our teaching staff. I promise you. And I say that as a teacher who lives with a teacher, who socializes with teachers, and I'm gonna hear about that, but I just have to tell you, our classified folks are woefully underpaid for what they're asked to do, and they deserve to be talked about in that conversation as much, if not more sometimes, than our teaching staff. And again, I'll wear that one for a while, so, but I do feel like when you give me a microphone, sometimes I say what I say, so. Moving on, first thing we have for you tonight is we have our operations update, and again, we have a lot of information for you tonight, so I will be brief with this. We highlighted technology this month, which was kind of fitting with the conversation you just had. One of the things we pointed out, we figured that number is 1,043 devices to every person in the technology department. That includes Dave and Tommy and the trainers, and even folks who don't necessarily interact with devices every day. Not the techs that are working on the devices, that's the total amount. They are dealing with lots of things. As you said, lots of different items. We've been meeting with principals about things that they would like to see, and there are many different devices that come in, that they like an iPad, they like a Winbook, they like a this or that, and our tech folks are really having to maneuver and make sure that they're getting those things used and getting them out properly, and then training folks to properly use those. So you see, and you can read through those things. Mr. Schuyler is here, and he is dealing a lot with E-rate right now for our funding for next year. That's eating up most of his time. But you can just things that, even when we started having devices and they started growing in scale, some of the firewall issues, the phishing issues, the things that we didn't used to have to deal with really now eat up lots of their time. As we add cameras, as we add safety devices, things that don't even impact the learning that the students and the teachers are using, they still require a lot of support and a lot of behind the scenes work. So that's a high level overview, and again, I'm not gonna read to you, but you can see the breakdown of what we have right there across the board. If you look at the bottom of that page, as always, I kinda outline what we're doing across the district. Please stop by Highland Park if you get a chance. Look at the interior, what we've done. We've done the flooring at Highland just like we did at Baker. We went darker this time and got the color right. It's prettier, and it's not showing the wear as much as the one at Baker. So we learned from that first one. The atrium looks amazing, especially when you get inside. And I think we've done some really good work there in moving forward that. So we're running through, and again, that's just a breakdown of what we're doing. We're really busy headed into the spring and trying to make sure that as we wrap the year up, we're ready for the summertime and where we can really do our work. So if you have questions about the overview, one good thing tonight, Mr. Hall's here, Tommy's here, Brian is here tonight from Food Services, Jamie Spencer's here, and Ben Metz from ESA. We're all here tonight. So they're not always all here, so if you have questions, it's a good night to ask those.
Well, okay. Y'all have any questions for all of them?
That's even better.
Well, then we'll forgive you for talking so long.
Yeah, hey, I told you gave me a microphone, right?
And let me say this to you. This board, since I've been on it, has never considered anything but something across the board.
And I wasn't
Right.
indicating you didn't. I just
No,
feel like everyone needs to be reminded of that.
But I am aware that
Constantly.
bus drivers are paid hourly and are paid less than what the surrounding counties. That's something we should look at. Okay. So you have all these people here supporting you, and none of you have a
We'll
question
get to them
for
in time, I guess, so it'll come at some point. So if you don't have questions, we can move on down our list.
Let's go.
Okay, again, the architect's report, Ben's here. I think Jamie's gonna discuss the GMP or the estimated GMP for Spring Hill High School with you, and Ben may be part of that discussion. And the next thing on there is Hewlett Spencer. I know that you guys had spoken to Jamie a month ago or a couple months ago and asked him to bring that information to you. He is here, and ready to speak on anything to deal with that Spring Hill High School project. So I'm gonna open it up to you guys if you have questions for him, or if you just want him to come up and give you an overview of where he stands with that right now.
Jamie, why don't you come on up? I think we did kinda have this discussion at the meeting, didn't we? That you feel like you could, you know, if the referendum passes, and we hope it will, then you will be able to. Yeah, come over here.
If we need it, I can. It's up to you guys. We're at the pleasure of the board on this. We were asked to bring the concept budget for the Spring Hill High School addition and renovation project that we worked on per the board's request. We have brought that. I have that handout. We haven't shared this budget actually public. We never got to get around to doing that back then. If you remember, there was a certain level that we went into looking at it, and once our team got inside, we found out there was a lot more wrong with Spring Hill High School. Y'all can all kind of think back and remember some of that. Ben is prepared to go through that again if the board would like to hear the 30,000-foot view of what is planned in the addition and renovation of Spring Hill High School. He has that prepared, and I have the budget numbers that have been updated to reflect that, and they really didn't change that much at all, too much from the time that we were there. You want them, don't you?
Hand it out, hand it out.
Pass them out. Well, you remember, Mr. Moore, you asked, hey, can you guys give a budget without having to spend, right? So, you know, on McDowell, we had a certain set of documents, went to a certain level, and we were able to GMP it. We never GMP'd Spring Hill High School. We were never directed to. But this was the budget, the concept budget that went along with the plans that ESA drew for Spring Hill High School. And it's it just seems, you know, for me just to start at the top, you can see the overall budget there. That's the all-in conceptual budget price for everything that was presented by ESA that Spring Hill High School needed. And Ben, that was a laundry list of additions and renovations. It was quite extensive, and it would have gotten the school up to, we were saying 1,800 or 2,000, 1,800. And it was everything that school could have needed to be online and be congruent with Columbia Central High School or something that we would have drawn at Battle Creek High School. This would have brought Spring Hill High School up. So I do kind of feel like if the board would like to hear what those are, just to get a recollection, and they're not just staring at a number there, unless everyone remembers what that included.
I think we'd like to see it, absolutely.
Go ahead, Ben.
Okay, let me step over here. Borrow this one.
I feel it's kind of necessary
I
when you
think
look
so,
at these numbers.
absolutely.
Huh? Yes, sir. Part of what I want you to do, Ben, is go through the first pass was a certain scope of work, if you remember, Ben, and then we found out that the scope actually increased based on the needs of that school. And I want to make sure you hit on that.
If you don't mind, Chair Kinzer, while he's going through that, again, and I appreciate you guys bringing this back. Again, my intention for asking for this was to be able to start having conversations as we look at capital requests and be able to get some numbers, some working numbers to the county commission to understand without having to go through that expense again. So regardless of what the number is, I appreciate you guys bringing that here so that we can start having those discussions with our funding body. And again, the intention would be whatever the number is brought under this model of just bringing us, your professional opinion on what a cost is, it's still the goal in working with you guys, were that to be approved, We would then work towards a GMP, which would then again be trying to get the most efficient cost we can get as well. And obviously, the agreements with our funding body could be such that we're not gonna, if they approve, if this happens to be more, we get a GMP, it's less than this. Obviously, the intention is for us to spend the GMP, not just to have a free-for-all with cash. And I wanna start to get that discussion with our funding body so that they understand we are still going to, at every step of the way, try to get this, to the best price we can.
All right, thanks everybody. I want to walk through real quickly just some of the exhibits that we had for you before with Spring Hill High School. By way of history, I do want to mention, when we first started looking at Spring Hill, the charge was, hey, can we add some dining capacity and some kitchen capacity to school? And so we started looking at that, and we said, and more appropriate band room. The current one, the ceiling's too low. The volumetric space is not great for students' hearing. We need more dining. We need a better library by far. We need a new auditorium, administration suite. So quite a few of those, we began to look at how to best fit that into the building. We'll flip through some of these. This is the existing school, just for reference. The second floor is smaller. And this is the areas that we would be removing of the existing school. So we would tear out the existing auditorium, the existing dining room. This is a small addition that holds a coffee shop and some other small classrooms. And then this tiny little guy right here is the admin suite. So it's really interesting that they operate an entire high school out of that office suite. It's very small. This shows the second floor spaces of those, what's being teared out. So beginning to look at what spaces we need. So replacing these areas with a larger dining room, a renovated larger kitchen space, larger auditorium in this location, a larger admin suite, CTE classrooms along this area here. The old library would be renovated into a CTE suite as well for mechatronics. A larger band room and practice gym would be added. The existing gym would remain. We know there's some issues with the length of that court, maybe not appropriate for every meet or every game, but rather than adding on another full, performance gym, it was decided, at least at that point, to add just a practice gym in this design. And then easing up quite a bit of indoor athletic support space by creating an inexpensive kind of pre-manufactured building with some locker and office space for outdoor sports. The upper floor, we would add a media center and science labs in this location. There was some discussion at one point to renovate the existing science labs as well. I believe in the current budget, those would be returned to classroom space, and so the new science labs would take place of those. And of course, we did a rendering. One of the big criticisms of the existing school,
Size gym, et cetera, and which is at first where we first budgeted, kind of where we were. And then, like Ben said, we knew that just wasn't going to fly within the county, so we started looking at how can we still that ESA had first designed. And Ben, this is no slight on the ESA because you guys do incredible work. Everybody knows that, but it was just entirely too much. Had a second level balcony. Took the second floor out. You can see that we removed the second level there. You see that in pink, 7,300 square feet, and reduced the scope. That took $3.6 million out of that auditorium. So now you can sort of see the process we were going forward, had us work on it.
Ms. Morency?
What kind of shape's the rest of the school in? I mean, if you're going to replace the certain areas of it, are you gonna have like old rundown areas and then nice new areas, or are they in good enough shape that,
No, that's a great question. Why would you spend all this money and then have, stained ceiling tiles in the corners?
Right.
This absolutely includes freshening up those areas in the hallways, common areas, ceiling grid, new ceiling tile, doing the floors. That's the kind of thing you're talking about. In some school districts, they used to call that sparkle. Give me sparkle, Jamie. It's an old school. I need it to sparkle again. Well, that's I've always stuck in my head. That's what you're referring to. And that would be included in this budget.
So the whole school will get an
fresh
update.
paint on the walls, new ceiling grid, new tile, and new flooring.
Yeah, one thing to remember as well, separately funded, at least at one point, was a new roof for that school and also new windows. That money was set aside until such point that the big project was done, so that the roof and windows for the entire school would be replaced at the same time. So I believe that is still. Nope, nope, nope.
Dissipated.
I see you're being quiet.
It went elsewhere over time, just because we were waiting. We do have some parking lot money that we've held back, you know, we expanded last year. One other thing, I'm gonna say this just in the middle of the discussion, one of the big concerns we have about the property at Spring Hill High School is not just the building itself. It is the egress and the ingress to the property. You have a child at Spring Hill High School, you understand what I'm talking about, the getting in and out of the school. Currently, we're using old Highway 31 as our main entrance, and the red light that's at the Shell station, and it is a debacle every day. The other thing, and we are somewhat landlocked by General Motors, in two areas. The back exit, we always get criticized, why are we not exiting on the back road out into the country back there? We don't own it. General Motors owns the bulk of it. We fenced, what we do own. The other part is, if you looked at that overhead where the band practices out in front of the school, is actually General Motors property. And our driveway that we currently access, our main drive that we access student parking with, technically sits on General Motors property. So we have some issues beyond just the building, that if we fix this building and we grow this building, we know we have to really account for the campus and how we're going to handle that many more people getting in and out of a campus that's just not easy to access right now. So, but that money that had been set aside for the roof, you know, we've had roof repairs, there has been quite a bit of work done on the roof and other parts of that building, but that large contingency, just has been eaten over time by things that were necessities that came up at other schools.
Mr. Howe?
And that was my question, was when we have the sparkle, is it gonna leak? Cause I don't want sparkle and then like, hey, look, a month later, that ceiling tile's got a stain. So I mean, I know we've worked on the roof, I just don't know.
I'll let Dave answer that. It's in good shape right now, but I'll let him answer that.
The money's not gone, it's just like there was $400,000 as a line item from, EMG for just new bleachers. And we've kind of waited to see what we're gonna do with that, depending upon, we're gonna build a new gym, what's gonna happen with that old one. So that line item is still there. The roof, I think don't quote me on the year, but it's past, it's not up to that year yet. It was and Rinks Consulting did an estimate, and they said roughly around $2 million to replace that roof. And that kind of came into pretty close, to where that was. Those line items are still there. The only thing that we'd really kind of held back was the paving or resealing, because we weren't sure what was gonna happen to that. Was it gonna get torn up? There's no sense in doing something if it's gonna get torn up. But all those other line items, they're still there. They're just farther down the road, and we just haven't, well, that's coming up on the next EMG deal. But once we get more funding for that, we're still working off of the 16 through 18.
Right.
Let's be clear though. The line item still exists.
Yeah.
It's not funded. It's still there. There's just no money in that line item. So I think we need to be clear on that. There's money for the parking lot. There's not money for anything else, because, as we said, if you know, and we're about to talk to you again about an EMG report in just the next couple of items, that was down the road, that, hey, this is on the list, it just wasn't there now. So it wasn't that the money was in that line item and we took it and just went, some monies have been skirted around to fix things that were necessary, but the list, the roof was actually down the road on that list.
And the other thing was, I know ingress and egress has been a problem, and I had looked at one time with Stan about the possibility of extending Old Highway 31 to the Christ Children property, and then we could use the interchange right there, which would be way more efficient, or perhaps talking with GM, but this was when he had one foot out the door and he was, so I'd like to talk to you about that, about perhaps talking to GM, talking to the school, using that property, it would help
Now
to
you-
alleviate that problem. So there are some options out there, I think.
The
we just need to
property
discuss.
that's directly behind the school, while it is owned by GM, is technically under the control of, the industrial board, the Murray County Industrial Board, for future growth back there. There had been talk with them of making a road that went from, Freehand over to, that's still at Christ, right there at the daycare, that's still Saturn Parkway. We don't think about that, but Saturn Parkway technically ends right there at the high school. It makes the whole circle. There is a whole lot to that. General Motors is a private entity, that controls a lot of land, and they like their road, not being heavily traveled by anyone but their folks. So we can address that, but I do know that Mr. Breeden had mentioned several times in the past that it's kinda like going to your daddy for money. The conversation doesn't always go well the first time. You might get it down the road, but it's not as simple as, hey, we'd like to push our kids out onto your, road here. The other issue with Old Highway 31, it technically ends right at the crosshairs right there when you enter the school. It's a whole concept. There is land that's owned by General Motors, land that's owned by the school system, land that's owned by the City of Columbia, and land that's owned by Murray County in about a 65-foot circle right there. Everybody conjoins. There's a lot of issues there. Where does the road end? Where does the school drive begin? And if you extend it over to the daycare, you are crossing General Motors property, and you're right at the interchange. So do you need to turn it and actually run back to the west to actually go north to hit the interchange, where it's not in that kind of, not a clover leaf, but where the ramps are? So but we have looked, it's a landlocked property.
Well, all we need to do is get to the interchange, because they do not own the interchange, that is state-owned property. So, all we have to do is get to that.
And I will say, and I don't know, and I'm just gonna, if you guys have not driven from Ripavilla to Bear Creek Pike, going south at about 2 to 4 in the afternoon, it doesn't matter where we put them out on the road at, nobody's moving. I've told you when we talk about transportation, a bus going from Spring Hill High School to Cox used to take roughly 12 to 14 minutes, and we're pushing 30 right now. It's just a bad place for it to be. There's just no good way to get them out.
Yep. I don't wanna take us too far down any kind of side trips, but I do have a couple questions. And I think we do need to do a little outside the box thinking too. What's the cost of a new high school running these days, Jamie? Just rough, ballpark. Take one out of the box and put it in the property.
$70 million.
Okay, so we're over halfway towards a new high school. If we were to,
That includes sports fields, all sports fields.
okay, if we were to repurpose the Spring Hill school that's up there, instead of Spring Hill High School, it's now Spring Hill, Kinzer Middle School, whatever. Do we still need to put as much work into it, or would it simply be the windows, the roof, and the sparkle? Roughly. I'm not pinning y'all down to anything, I'm just thinking.
I wanna make sure I understand your question.
What I'm getting at is we don't need the same level of capacity. We need smaller capacity if we make it into a middle school or an elementary school.
If you take the current Spring Hill High School
And we put it somewhere else. Do we still need the same, we would not need the same capacity for a building. So that would change, I know it would change everything that y'all have worked on.
Most all the additions, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we would be looking at a much smaller number in that area.
Yeah.
And just with what you've been talking about with the ingress and egress problems, and it's all surrounded by General Motors, it's gonna sound like a joke, a question, but it's serious. Have we ever been approached to sell that land or that building? Anybody know?
I do not know that. I know that that building has been a conversation piece for a long time. When I was at Cox, before Spring Hill Middle was built, they actually came and looked at converting Cox to a second, like a 612 and making that building a 612. And it turned out that the square footage at Cox wouldn't handle high school classes, so they went and built the middle school. We're heavy on middle school seats right now. Who knows how long that lasts, but especially in the Spring Hill area, we're heavy on middle school seats. It would be hard to convert it and fill it. Now, by the time you get a new high school built, that could be maybe an option, and you could look at alternatives for how you do that. But as far as actually selling that property, I don't know of any talk we very rarely talk about selling school property. Mr. Howes had me working on some property, questions around the county, and I don't know that it ever happens. It's just property that sits for a while, but, we could always explore that if it were your wish.
Okay, well, we're just almost 60% of the way to a brand-new high school, so that's why I'm just thinking we might need to think of some out-of-the-box thinking. Thank you all for your information, I appreciate it.
Mr. Moore?
And I guess some of my questions on that were along the same lines. I mean, that's where I start getting to, if you figure, we're at a $43 million number here, knock $1 million off, add $2 more million for the roof, I don't know how much for additional windows. We're still looking at $44, $45 million to functionally bring it to an 1,800 student school, which is really just adding about 300 students. Now, I understand that's adding to the core, but if you're talking about adding, total seats above what we already have. And that was one of the reasons, when we had originally talked about this, is that I, obviously pushed for a new high school at Battle Creek, because at that point you are building a full 1,800 student school and you are adding 1,800 seats. And I had always had concerns, and I still do have concerns about the capacity that Spring Hill High School is, that even when we do these changes, based on the location, it is a mess. It's only going to get worse, and there's really nothing we can do to fix that, ever. We could do some minor tweaks to help with a little bit of flow, but really there's nothing we can do to fix that part of it. So, I mean, that's obviously some things as a board that we would have to kind of talk about what we want to do. I start to have heartburn on just when we start talking about this is impacting X number of students and it costs this much money, and you have a cost per student at that point, and it starts to be, kind of like Mr. Fulbright's saying, it starts to make me question, do we need to look at other options or consider what else to do?
Well, so if we add 1,800 students to the Battle Creek campus, what does that do to the traffic there? It's even a worse situation. So we can't get a bridge. So I mean, well, so I mean, I understand that this isn't, Spring Hill High School is not optimal. It's not even in city limits of Spring Hill. It's not even in the zip code of Spring Hill. So I mean, we can change it today and they can annex it, and it's still gonna say Raider Way, Columbia, Tennessee 38401. So I mean, it's not ideal, but this is just what we are dealing with, and we have to figure the best, you're right, the best way to deal with it.
Any other comments, Jamie? No.
The last thing, at what point would we want to have some capital request numbers, as we traditionally do, to send to the county commission?
The 16th, we have to present to you on the 16th our capital budget.
Okay.
Of March, and then the general budget's not till April 20th. I looked that up after you guys were talking, but the 16th is when we do our capital presentation.
When will we make a decision then?
We present ours to you in March, and then
You go present to us in March.
We present to you in March, and then you guys decide and move it on from there.
Yeah. One more question for Jamie. I wanna go back and revisit McDowell. Granted, we've gone past the point where the GMP is valid, so let's ignore that. Running some numbers, are you still comfortable with the numbers that you had there? What was that number, or does it need to be adjusted some at this point?
Sure. It would have to be bid back out, but
Okay.
we did meet on that, and at the same time we met about Spring Hill High School with Bell. Our GMP dated, June 10th, 2019 to Chairperson Kinzer gave a GMP of $21,499,000. And of course, that lasted about 90 days as everyone, and it kinda, yeah. You know, we need about 5 weeks to go back out to the bidding community. I don't know how fast the money would be available from the Doug Laconan's office, but for our part, to re-GMP McDowell Elementary, we need 5 weeks on the street to confirm all of our major subs in the bids, and then another week just to, sharpen it up, so we're 6 weeks out, we could have a new.
Well, then, I guess I'm looking for more of just kind of a rough number here. Are we, in your experience and what we're talking about here, I mean, is it a little higher than this? Is it about the same?
Yeah, David, I mean, with just cost, I mean, it may
Okay.
be up slightly, it may be in the 22 and some change now.
Because
But
what I'm
it's not
saying
gonna
is
be-
obviously, if we were gonna present something back to the county commission, it would need to be done before you're gonna be able to get a new GMP. And even at that point, that by the time they would actually approve it, a GMP wouldn't be valid anymore anyway.
Right.
So is it fair to say, and again, these are working numbers, that we're
They
kind of
are.
in the $22 million ballpark still?
Because the next time this board asks us to GMP McDowell, we can't go out to the bidding community and them take us serious.
Understood.
They're gonna say, man,
And
we
which is
worked
what
on
I'm
this
not
for
looking
you."
to do again.
Right.
So, for the purpose of this, if we're talking about these two projects, we are currently looking at somewhere around 43 million for one and 22 million for the other.
Yes, sir, I'd say that's a fair budget.
Gets us a working number.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anything else then? Moving on, train report, was there anything in that attached?
Train report's just an FYI for you.
Okay. What about, capital projects cost?
Again, just an FYI.
Just an FYI, okay. All right, then you've got a bid, facility assessment phase 2.
Yes, ma'am. If you look in your packet, this is actually just a continuation of our service that we've had with EMG. We are 5 years out from our original EMG list. They recommended it to us on the front end and have maintained all the way that every 5 years is when you need to look at this. We have money set aside in that money, to pay for them to come back in. We met with them and gave them some new parameters. The last time that EMG came in and looked at our facilities, they did not include Central High School because it was in construction. This time, we have asked them to include every school, Central High School and the 2 new Battle Creeks, because they give us down the road a 10 to 15-year window, and even those new schools within a 10 to 15-year window are gonna start showing that they need some work done at some point. The other thing that we've asked them to do, that they did not do last time, is to start where our property begins and stop where it ends. Look at our parking lots, look at our outdoor facilities, our stadiums, our restrooms, our concession stands. Look at everything that we own, not just the building, and then bring back to us a priority list that shows those things reflected as well. We did that, and we feel that that's important because you guys have, and you're going to again tonight, talk to Mr. Pointer about athletic facilities. We've dealt with drainage issues and things like that. We still have drainage issues we're dealing with, and we really feel that we need outside experts to come in and look at them and say, this is the scope of work that you're looking at, and this is what needs to be done immediately. We know there are large-scale athletic things that need to happen that aren't just pretty, but that are real safety issues, but you guys taking $500,000 out of fund balance can never address those. So we need a number. We need to be able to show the funding body, not just you, but the commission, this is a true need. This isn't, hey, we'd like a new something for our kids to play on. This is a true facility need. It's not a sparkle. It is a bones structure that has to be addressed. So we're coming to you just asking to continue that service that we've had with EMG. It's just a continuation of what we've been working on, for them to come back in, look at our facilities, and the other thing that we asked them was to do this. Give us information on what we've done over the last 5 years. And the commission has been very, very gracious in funding the 2 bonds that we've worked off of. We wanna show you guys, and we wanna show them as well, this is the return you got for the money that you gave us to work on these buildings. From 5 years ago, these were the issues we had at buildings. These were the value of our buildings. We see what we've done over the last 5 years, and this is where we brought it because we wanna be very transparent with both bodies to say, we're trying to do the best with the resources you give us to make things efficient, to make things safe, to make it prettier, when we can, but to really come back and say, as appreciative as we are from what you've done for us, there's still a lot to do, because our buildings, not only were left, we like to say a lot of times they were left alone for a long time, but you guys know as homeowners and as property owners, even a new house needs work, and our Battle Creek schools are gonna need a lot of work. So this proposal, and you've got the entire thing in your packet, the cost comes out, I believe, to $152,000. That is a renewal of that service. It carries us through the next 5 years again, and it gives us that list to work off. The other thing that they have done, and I failed to mention this, we operate our maintenance, program through a software called School Dude, where each school enters work orders into the School Dude system, and it populates for maintenance work off. This company now owns School Dude. We didn't know that until we met with them, and everything that they catalog for us, they will drop into our School Dude system. So when they come look at an HVAC unit at Spring Hill Middle School, and they take the serial number and all of the model numbers off of that, they drop it into our system, which automatically alerts us when there's a recall on that item. Automatically alerts us as to when the warranty still is in effect, so that when our maintenance men go and they pull and they're working on that unit, they can look and it says, hey, this is a warranty issue. This isn't something that we, just by mistake, because we didn't know that, we pay for. So we see value in that. We hope that you've seen that value, and we're just asking for an extenuation of this service with them.
Any discussion about this?
And that money is in that, it's already set aside for that.
So are you okay to put it in consent? Yes, okay. All right, you're still up.
The Battle Creek Way Bridge plans. We're back and forth on that property. We sent the county, the new map with the property under the road, and they sent us the bridge, and they said they're gonna approve, or they'll look at approving our new map, but we've got to approve the bridge plans. Now, I'm gonna tell you, there are no engineering experts, maybe, on our side of the table as to how bridges work, but these are the plans that the Highway Department, that Mr. Boshears, they've worked closely with the designers, they've brought them out. This is an alternative plan to the one that the city of Spring Hill did initially. However, it does address the same length of the span, and it does connect. That also, not only within this, we're approving the bridge, but it's really from our drive to their drive. It's really building the road that goes along with it and making it all connect. So, again, we moved the property to them. They've sent this to you for you to look at and to say yea or nay, and it's just part of moving that process forward.
Any questions? Mr. Moore?
Along with that, did they have any discussion or any feedback on basically being in charge of the road from end to end, once this is completed?
My understanding, and I talked to Mr. Sumners, we didn't go into specific at depth, they're gonna take it.
Okay.
When they take that road under it, it's gonna become a road that connects, and it's not a driveway, this is a road. I think that their hope is that they eventually make some kind of agreement with the city and it becomes a city road. They are prepared if that does not happen, for it to be their road.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So can we consent?
Got one question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, would it be to our benefit to have a engineer, architect look at this and see how it falls in, or?
I don't know that. I know that even when I was in the transportation department, I visited this site with Mr. Boshears probably 4 times, and they've had, their engineering company that builds all the bridges in the county is the one that's designed it, and they've been out there. So it would be just like if they were building a bridge out in the county, it's the same group that they've worked with before.
Okay, all right.
Colliers.
Still on consent? Okay. All right, thank you so much.
I got one more, I think.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Actually, I've got,
Big one.
I got 2 more.
All right.
number 5, the school capacity projections. We loaded this to you today. And this is a joint document that brings together three documents that we work on in-house. If you look at this side here is our current enrollment in every grade at every school as of yesterday. It was pulled yesterday morning, and it shows your breakdown. Along with that, you have a capacity number for each building, and you have the capacity rating that the current population is at within that building. So you can see that percentage. On the right side of the dark black line, you've got 2 sets of information. The first set on the right side of that dark black line is the number of out-of-zone and out-of-county students at each school. The column to the right of that gives you the percentage of current population that those out-of-zone and out-of-county students make up at that school. If you remember, when we talked about redistricting before, we work off of 2 different sets of numbers. Our side, our operations department and transportation, we can take a zone, we can draw the line around that zone, and our computer will tell us how many students in each grade live within that zone. That's a different number than capacity including out-of-zone students, because our system does not take into effect kids that live in Spring Hill but go to school in Mount Pleasant. We just say this is the zoned area. This is your current out-of-zone percentages, and I gave them to you for reference because to the right of that is your projected enrollment for next year that is still contains your out-of-zone, out-of-county numbers. Okay, so you can see those last 2 columns this is what we project for next year if that rate of out-of-zone students holds true. If they hold roughly the same rate that they have now, this is where you will be next year, and then you have your capacity number for each school based off of that rating. So we really took 3 sets of information, current numbers, current capacity numbers, and projected numbers along with that out-of-zone to give you this document. And it's just an FYI as you move forward with kind of where we sit right now looking at each building.
Ms. Morency? Or was it you?
These capacity numbers, I'm gonna question them again. Are these, Dr. Register's numbers that we came up with?
I slightly lowered them because Dr. Register's numbers make me really uneasy, and I will say that simply because I spent 17 years in Cox Middle School, and he has a capacity number of around 1,400, and I remember when we had 1,059 and we had kids in the closets. They're at 770 something right now, I think roughly, 742, and they're pretty full.
I'm questioning, Mount Pleasant Elementary. I mean, they have 1 classroom that is being used for Boys and Girls Club. And they have 500 and, they're close to 600 kids, and 740, I just don't believe that you can put 740 kids over there.
The last calculations that we had for capacity, Mr. Breeden sent out worksheets to each principal, and it said, how many classrooms do you have? All right, and again, we go back to your EIA numbers of a kindergarten class can have this many kids.
Right.
A 3rd, 4th can have this many kids. You know, and that does work all the way up through high school.
Right.
We have those numbers all the way through. So they took that number and said, if you have X number of classrooms at this EIA number, you hold this many children. Now, the capacity of each room, you gotta remember this. While the state says, let's say for a middle school, that your EIA average needs to be below 30, you can have a max of 35 kids in each room. So we have to settle somewhere on, are we gonna use the 30 number or are we gonna use the 35 number? And it really becomes a play point. I will tell you this from experience, and again, I just tell you how I feel about it. When Spring Hill Middle was being built, there was an article ran in the paper that showed that Cox was at like 70% capacity. Within 2 weeks, our capacity number fell 300%, and suddenly we're at 90% and you need a new building. It just happened that way. We didn't pick up kids, we didn't lose kids, we changed the capacity number, and the percentage went up. This capacity number, and I will tell you what I did on the elementary, Like Baker was 382, I made it 380. I didn't go crazy and change greatly what we had worked on. They very much resemble the numbers that we had when we did redistricting the last time. You can just see they're all pretty even numbers now. So
Well,
I will tell you.
I just know Battle Creek has 700. Mount Pleasant, there's no way they have capacity for more kids than Battle Creek.
And again, I will say,
There's just no way.
Mr. Breeden had them work off of that worksheet, and that was the number we came to.
If you would you please double check that, 'cause I've
Yes.
talked to, the principal over there, and her reaction was the same thing.
I will.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo her sentiment. I know that there are schools on here, I'll pick Culleoka because that's the one I'm most familiar with. 1145, no. See that door over there? That's a Culleoka classroom. We have teachers teaching out of closets that are on rolling carts. So, and we're out of closets, and we need more teachers, but we have nowhere to put them. So, I mean, I'm not putting you on, but I'm just saying, these numbers, they don't represent what we actually had in our actual schools currently.
And here's the hard part. According to the state, 20 to 35 kids can go in that classroom if you deem it a classroom. So in order to get a number, I don't know that we'll ever get a number that we're all completely happy with, because I'll tell you, even 1,000 kids in Cox at this point, when you've added labs and you've added all, it's just thing, you've added
Right.
STEM rooms, you've got CTE rooms that are at a lower rate, it just, when you talk about capacity, it's just like a gym that has a sign that says you can put 2,800 people in here, and you're going, I can't believe 2,800. That would be, that's the hard part of, if we deem it an elementary classroom, or we deem it a middle school classroom, there's a number that goes with that we don't always have the opportunity to walk in and go, well, this classroom's a little bit, it may be 10 by 10 smaller than the one next door. The number that class could still have is the same.
Right.
So it becomes very hard to say this number isn't. Now, we can come to numbers and say, well, we're kind of comfortable with it, and especially in the old buildings, is that hard to do. The newer buildings are a little more clean cut, but the older buildings are harder to come in and say, well, you can actually put this many in here. One thing too, and I know this from having been in a building when we were at Cox at 1.500 and at 1.1059. We put 1,059 kids in that building. We did. And we moved. We went 2 years with it. We worked every day for 2 years. We had class every day for 2 years. It's full. It's really, really full. But is it a doable thing? Yes. We did not have, and we have not had the opportunity to go room to room. But I do know Mr. Breeden did send out to principals. Give us how many classrooms you have. Give us how many special needs rooms you have, because that lowers your numbers. How many standalone CDC or preschool rooms? We take that number out and we lower. How many CTE rooms do you have? Because that's a max of 25, not of 35. So those work. The math sometimes is very different than the eye test. And that's just the hard part of it. That's the hard part of zoning, really, is that there's always gonna be a line somewhere, there's always gonna be a number somewhere, and the number that exists doesn't always match what you and I see on our eyes.
But this is for our information, and why would we put ourselves in that position to say that you can put 800 kids in this school when you should only have 600 kids in the school? Do you understand what I'm saying? Why would we do that to our schools and our kids and our teachers?
And I agree. My question to you would be this. Do you want me to come up with a number that everybody's comfortable with? Do you want us to have a committee that comes up with a number? What if I have, because, and here's the, look, I say what I say, right? Because principal salaries are based off of the number of teachers and kids in their room. They all want more kids in their building because they all make more money when there are more kids in their building. So they will say, that's classroom, you can put, now there are some that go, we couldn't do that. So do you want me to come up with a way and bring back to you and say, this is a group of people that we're gonna take into our elementary schools and we're gonna determine this number? Or do you want us to just say arbitrarily, hey, you got 550, you're comfortable with 550, we just say it's 550, when we really go in and we look and we got 2 rooms of storage that we kinda really sorta need. Randolph-Howell has rooms of county special needs storage that we know we can't put a child in today, but if we really had to, we can empty that storage and we can probably put 75 to 100 more kids in that building. So that's the hard part, and the hard part is we have, every one of these numbers is lower than Dr. Register's number. So how do we go into, what is that process you want us to take? Because we'll be happy to do it. And again, that's when I get into the logic and the math. And right now, this is math. However, on some of these smaller schools, 380 on Baker, they got 367 kids. So that's probably about right. So not all of them are wrong. I would say that there's picks and spots that are.
I just want the right numbers. I mean, you know, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've been over there a lot, and if you have a CTE class and you say, are you counting that as a classroom?
Depends on how they turn it in now. The classroom, it is a classroom, but that number changes.
You don't have you have kids in there, if I'm a first grade.
It's not how many kids are in there, it's how many kids can you put in there.
No, I understand that, but if you're a first grade classroom, you have 25 kids in your class, and then they go to music, that's 50 kids you're counting, and you can only put 25 kids in there.
But there can be 25 kids in the classroom while there are 25 kids in music. So, I mean, that's how it works. There's no way to pull out.
Those 25 kids that are in the music class have a classroom, have their home classroom. So it's not 50 kids, it's 25.
But at any point in the day, there may be 25 kids in there and 25 kids elsewhere. And it's different with the elementary school. And I'm not arguing, I'm just saying the logistics of this are not as simple as walking in and going, how many kids are you comfortable having in your building? Because that is 23 different answers from 23 different building administrators. I will be happy. We will be happy to come up with that number. We had the formula that Dr. Register used, and it was a hard formula. This is a classroom, this is how many kids. Nobody likes that number. Because at some point, capacity becomes numbers. You can put this many kids in a building, not we would like this many kids, but, and again, when you look at 23 to 43 to 60 billion dollars for a new building, sometimes that number becomes a number we don't like. And that's just the reality of that.
Mr. Moore, turn his light off, it has to be next before y'all turn it on. Mr. Moore.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Morency, I mean, this is something since the first day I got on the board, I questioned the numbers because we had reports from day one, literally in 2014, that had different numbers from different sources. And I can understand feeling like there should be more, but ultimately, in my opinion, we've got to go back to the principal, and if they're saying that's how many students they can fit in their building, at some point I have to trust that they're gonna give us a number that we can work with. I get even more uncomfortable, we talk about going in with some other process, and trying to mandate that that's what it's gonna be. I think we may not like the results of that at the end of the day either.
And I'm great with that. I will tell you.
But that's just me.
I will tell you, having been part of the principal realm, you change principals, you might get a different number. So we have to have some sort of agreement on that.
And I think that's been glaringly obvious as we've gone through this process.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, when we talked about building these new schools at Battle Creek, we talked about programming and how much programming a building changes how you use those. When we shift, for example, when we moved quite a few classes over to Marvin Wright from the special ed classes, that all of a sudden changes the numbers at Marvin Wright and adjusts some of the other schools where we maybe took those classes away. We freed up some space. So, I mean, obviously, as we look at that, there's things, not just in the building, but from a district that we can do to move those around as well.
Can I do this for you? I will, between now and when we come back in 2 weeks, I will talk to every principal and ask them the number of students that they think they can comfortably handle in their buildings. And I will give that to you guys as a comparison between what the formulas say to what they say, and at least that's a good starting point for us to say, how do we tackle this down the road? And we come to a number that we agree upon. I wanna offer a solution, is that
I
at
think
least a
that's
starting point?
I think that's, Ms. Parker's light's on, Mr. Fulbright,
Okay.
let them speak.
My question is with regards to the out-of-zone, out-of-county numbers. When you're doing the projections for the next year, are you taking into account, like, for example, like at Baker, are you just looking at K through 3 and not looking at 4th? Because obviously those aren't gonna be, are you just assuming that those will
And
come
those
back?
come somewhat from Mr. Lang's system, and I know that from systems in the past, and he's on a new system, so I'll let him answer this. You kind of hold trend
Okay.
with what you see that pattern as being. If your school, if your grades are going up in pattern, you see that. If you have an outlier, it obviously becomes harder the higher your out-of-zone number becomes. If you
Right.
look at someone like Cox, they have a 1.75 out-of-zone rate, they're not changing that much. If you look at some of these other schools that have 16 to a much higher number, it becomes harder to predict that over time. And a lot of our out-of-zone and most of our out-of-county folks are teachers' children.
Right.
And as they move, sometimes that number moves as well.
Well, and part of the reason why I'm asking is because I know for some schools, they might accept kids in kindergarten because their numbers are low that year, but then the next year, they might jump up and all of a sudden, they want to keep the kids that started in kindergarten at their school, and that's kind of been the trend that we do, but if our numbers go up too high and we need the space, I don't know that we really go back and look at those. I don't know, maybe that's school by school, but.
And again, I know at one time there was a 0 out of zone on elementary school for years and years and years. You couldn't go out of zone to an elementary school because we were tight on space. That's not how we've operated for several years now.
Right.
But again, that may be something that as space becomes tight, that you guys have to maybe say.
Mr. Fulbright.
Just a couple questions for clarification. When you figured up the capacity percentage, you just took attendance divided by capacity. Well, the Spring Hill number's wrong.
Okay? For which school?
Spring Hill High School. It's 93% capacity, which means that the school that we just spent all this time spending $45 million on is the third fullest school in the county. Now, obviously, it needs some more help, but it would be behind capacity of Baker, McDowell, and I didn't even look at the future capacities. Those look like they're a little more accurate, but still, it's not the highest. So I'm questioning, number one, how that happens, because it looks like it's just a spreadsheet formula. I mean, I don't think there's any
And there may be an outlier. I'll recheck that. I will make sure it's corrected for your next meeting. If it is if there was something that was an outlier, I'll put it in red for you.
I think this is kind of speaks to a little bit of what we've been dealing with. That looks like a very scary number. We're less than 0.5% away, but in reality, we're not. We're 7% away from capacity at Spring Hill High School. We go by this number, we're building a new building tomorrow. And I think that's what we've rushed into too many times. My other question is, if I'm a principal, I can set the school up and say, I have a capacity for 360 students. Somebody else walks in there and say, well, you have 7 storage classrooms. You're not maximizing your space. So it may look like I've got an extremely crowded school, but I'm just not making very smart use of my space. So how does that figure in to when you go in and figure out the capacity, or whoever does, look at the capacity versus maximization of space?
And again, I'll give you the programming of that school, and principal to principal and program to program changes over time. There's a room at Cox Middle School that it's in the back of the building that when I first was there was a classroom, and it was a classroom that had kids in it every period. Then over time it became a storage room. Now it's the weight room. Well, you don't have a capacity for the weight room, so that one room has changed function 3 times. Sometimes depending upon your programming for the district. We had Latin at one point. We've had foreign languages. You don't have those. You had different types of programs that were standalone self-contained programs, that change over time. So that's a constant number. If you add some sort of mechatronics lab, or if you add, when we don't do it now, but we used to add computer labs, that can affect the overall number. There just has never been an agreement on how do we come in and do that. Maybe we bring something to you that says these are the numbers we use, and then you approve it,
Well,
and then we help with that. But it changes as the life of the building changes and as the administrator changes.
Well, and that's the only thing. I wanna make sure that we're not wrestling with a overcrowding issue when we're really wrestling with a misuse of space issue. And cause that's hundreds of millions of dollars
Yeah.
of difference right there.
And your schedule determines a lot. Your schedule, you know, if you're on a block schedule, then 1/4 of your classrooms are empty at all times, cause there's 1/4 of your staff on planning at all times. It's not that way necessarily if you're on a different schedule. So the programming, the scheduling, the types of outside of general academic classes, the special classes you offer, we house county, employees in some buildings. Homebound has its own room in a building. There are PT people that have a room that serves as their, cause we don't have office space for them. So right now it serves as an office. So there's lots of elements in there. I agree completely that it's an arbitrary number that we've never landed on as a correct number. So let me bring you some options if you're okay with that on maybe how we can get to a better number. And I'll start by bringing you what the principals say they feel comfortable with, and then maybe you can give me guidance on how you want us to attack that, or I can just bring you some ways that other districts attack that. And we can maybe come up with something that becomes more of a formula type thing that also has the ability to ebb and flow. Dr. Register's formula shows that every building's much higher than this.
Mr. Moore?
To kind of go along with Mr. Fulbright's on that, what I would like to see personally, and again, I'm comfortable with the starting position being where the principals set their capacity numbers. However, as we reach some trigger point, whatever that percentage is, where we're talking about maximum capacity, and we're talking about having to potentially build additions or upgrades or new buildings, I think it may be at that point where staff needs to step in and have some fresh eyes look at how are we using this facility, and can we use it better to prolong and get us through. I mean, let's talk about the Spring Hill High School, for example. Even if we were to get a number out there for that, and get approval, we're talking about 2 years out before or a little more than 2 years out before anything's actually done. So even if it was approved tomorrow, and if we were at a capacity position, we would have to figure out what to do for the next 2 years. So I think maybe we need to be looking at a process for that includes stepping in as central office. Maybe there's a team of other principals that come in and give, like I said, some fresh eyes looking at how it's being utilized and programmed. Another one, obviously, we talked about was, before we go to rezoning, I'd like to look at clearly moving out-of-zone students out, or maybe cutting off those restrictions. Maybe those need to be moved down. I think we need a process that kind of goes through those steps of what are the things we're going to do before we really have to talk about, or before we really move ahead with making an addition or doing any kind of other portables, upgrades, anything else. What are these steps we can do that are just functionally moving things around in the resources we already have before we go to that step? And you can come up with those, right?
I got you.
I figured
Just
you
wrote
got
it down
this.
right there. You guys never failed the one I think will
Oh,
be
sorry.
the easy one.
One more
No,
thing
I
with
know.
this. Are there, actually, I got
We're
two
getting
more
in the
things.
weeds tonight.
One more thing on this. Are there any schools, and again, obviously you're gonna recheck the numbers, and Mr. Fulbright, I looked at the math, it is like 93%.
It is, it's 93, I just did.
So, are there any schools that are concerning you that you feel like we need to look at taking steps for next school year?
Obviously, I think that as we see the growth pattern in Spring Hill High School is even at 93, has a larger capacity of growth in the short term than the others. Elementary ebbs and flows so much. Over my 5 years in transportation, I saw it move from school to school, grade level to grade level changes. You may have a lot of kindergartners one year, and then it kind of goes down. I will say, and we mentioned this to you before, we have some big neighborhoods that are being planned not only for Spring Hill. I know we talk about that, but I'm talking about the county portion of the northern part of the county, but then also Columbia proper. And I'm talking out towards Mount Pleasant, there, behind Ashwood Manor, there's a huge neighborhood that's planned there. You've got new neighborhoods, new apartment complexes on Tom Hitch. You have, Mooresville Pike has a big area that's cleared off that's in the city that's looking for growth. You have the new, apartments above Lowe's. There's a lot of growth in Columbia proper itself. And that really cuts off at about the Coke plant is where we change over. You know, as you go north, the new apartments that are on the left as you exit the city right there, those are actually Spring Hill Elementary apartments. So that's really where we change right there, okay? So we have a lot of growth here, but we also have a lot of outlying growth up there that, and I'll tell you this, and I'm gonna shut up after this because you know I talk too much. If you are just driving the main roads, you're missing where the houses are being built. Turn off and get into the weeds, and there's a lot of driveways, a lot of places that people don't really think they're at, so.
Mr. Moore?
I just want one more thing, and I know I keep saying it, because I see the houses every day. We are according to his numbers, a 20% jump at Wright next year, is what they're looking at.
Wright is our biggest.
And I don't doubt it by looking at what's being.
The Columns that's across from McDonald's right there is Marvin Wright. Grand Reserve is expanding. You've got a new, two new apartment complexes off of, or one new one down past Wright on Derryberry, where it turns into Wright. You've got 3 new neighborhoods on Tom Lunn up there. You've got a new neighborhood off of Port Royal, and you have 2 neighborhoods off of 431 that are all Wright neighborhoods. It is, and Somerset Springs, which is the condos are tripling in size. That's the big one.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. I never thought I'd say this, but we're gonna have the septic discussion.
Yes, and it's not a fun and we're bringing this to you right now for some direction. We have gotten into 2 issues, and they're crappy issues, there's no other way to say it. I've mentioned to you Hampshire, and Hampshire is it's at a point of we have to fix this. Santa Fe is nearing that point, and what we find at both places that we are on septic systems, we have challenges in both places. There's a water table issue at Hampshire that is very much in line with where all of this piping and all of these septic tanks lie. At Santa Fe, we don't know where all of the septic fields are. We know where some of them are, and they're not on our property. They're on the farm behind our property. That's where our septic fields lie. They're not even on we don't own them. They're somewhere else. And we don't know where maybe 2 to 3 fields are. We had a company come in and really look at what we're doing there, and we have come up with things that we know going into this process. The known cost between the 2 schools is $390,000 to fix them. However, this is a work order or change order nightmare of a project, because if we don't know where fields are, we really don't know if we're gonna fix everything when we know what we're fixing already. So we really looked at this and said, this is something that we think that Jamie and Hewlett Spencer can help us manage, because they can bring in different companies, different engineering groups to look at this, and they can handle these change orders without us standing in front of you and going, this isn't $390, this is $425, and let me tell you why. So we built a contingency in at both places. We've looked at it, we've had them look at it, but here is the question we're bringing to you tonight. And we really, from an operational side, see this as not something that can wait, okay? And I say that with no build up at all. We don't think this can wait. Hampshire cannot go another year in the condition that it is in. We have a pump in the ground that is running nonstop, pumping well water or groundwater out of our septic system right now. It's gonna be about $500,000. We got 2 places that we could possibly get $500,000. One's fund balance. 2, we have $1 million set aside in EMG money for McDowell. Those are the only 2 options we have to find $500,000. And we need direction on you or from you as to how you would like for us to handle this project moving forward. We do have money in EMG, but it is earmarked, it has not been touched. It's much like that roof money for Spring Hill High School, but it actually exists, and it's there, and those are our only two options in moving forward. So we're asking two things. One, that you do approve this and let us move forward, but two, you tell us how you would like for us to fund this. That's why there's no recommendation, and that's why it's simply for discussion. We're bringing it to you. And in order to get this done over the summer, we need to be able to move pretty much within the next 3 weeks, because the companies that are lining up this type of work, they work in the dry weather. And if we push this back another month or two, then we may miss our summer window and have to look at maybe fall break, which puts us right back into starting the school year in kind of especially at Hampshire, the dire need that we're in right now.
It seems to me that the $1 million was considered in the cost. When Reggie made the ask to, for McDowell, the GMP, that $1 million that was set aside was to pay for that cost. I don't know what fund balance is right now, Shipper's left. So I don't know, how do you all feel about it? Ms. Parker?
I would just say that when we got that money approved for EMG for McDowell, it wasn't for $1 million for McDowell. It was significantly more.
That was what Mr. Breeden set aside.
Right. So, I mean, what I'm saying is, we've already gone into that pool from McDowell several times. I believe the number for EMG was closer to $5 million. If
Mr. Hall.
That's my recollection. So, I mean, we've already spent $4 million from it. I mean, I personally don't want to hit fund balance. We've already taken $4 million from it. With another $500,000, especially if we know that we're going to have to build another school there potentially, and seek full funding from the commission for that to be a reality. I mean, I don't think $1 million is really going to make a difference on McDowell today.
No, the only thing that, from our maintenance department, and Murray with his guys, that we see that could be, and we really anticipate an immediate thing, is our chiller. And of course, that's coming up in the springtime. And that would probably be about $200,000. But aside from that, we did have, when EMG did some of their studies, they had the $1 million for electrical, the $3 million for plumbing and everything. And so we fixed most of those things, or addressed most of those things, and so we scaled back some of those monies to go elsewhere. But it's just a matter of how much do we keep for McDowell. And I agree that we could use that, just knowing that there are some things that we're getting really tight.
And we do think that if, at setting this with the contingency at $500,000, it could come back at $390. And it could be that we've got everything on the front end, we addressed it, they were exactly right. But when we are looking and we say we don't even know where two to three fields of septic line even exist, when we're looking at Hampshire, we don't know that fixing the septic tank and really cleaning it and sealing it, we don't know that groundwater is that we're still not gonna produce enough that we have to add a field at Hampshire, so that we're not constantly addressing a backflow issue. And again, we've had to put a pump in the ground that's running right now pretty much nonstop, and it's not even raining. It's just there's so much groundwater, and we just felt like we needed to come to you and say, before we made an arbitrary decision to say we're just gonna take this, and then we run into a question like, well, you do have roof money, right? Well, no, we took that. We wanted to be upfront with you and really transparent in what we're doing.
Any other comments? I agree with Ms. Parker. I think that we have the money in hand, and we're gonna have to ask for the money for McDowell as well. They'll still leave you enough for a chiller if you need it.
Were you okay if based off of this, I write the memo just recommending that we do that and we add it to the board meeting for you?
It's okay with me. What about the rest of the board? I'm hearing.
That's fine?
Okay.
We'll do that.
Fine, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And, we'll have to have a budget amendment for it, but we'll have to pass that first.
We'll get with, if I can write the memo, I'll get with Doug and then just get them to put it with
Yeah, if you just put the budget amendment with it.
We'll do that.
and then you'll probably need to be at the budget meeting to explain that, but no, never mind, hopefully not. Okay, Mr. Al.
So if we don't own the property that this field line is zoned, well, that kinda troubles me a little bit.
We do have a pump over there, and we feel.
But
and-
do we
and
have a right-of-way? Do we have?
We're looking into right now.
Can we get to our pump?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking into, because, one of the things Mr. Hall and I talked about, and that was the first thing I said to you, is what do you mean, and we don't own it, is,
This is one of these
Is
things
it-
from years ago that we just had
has
a handshake deal to.
yes,
yeah,
it's one of those
okay.
things where, has this property sold since those were put in? And if it did sell, was the new buyer notified? We're digging into those issues. But, you know, we find that with some of these old buildings is that, you know, John knew Tommy and Tommy said, hey, just put it over there, I don't care. And that's just kinda how it works.
Write it down this time.
Yes, that's what we're doing.
Write it down somewhere.
That's what we're trying to do, so.
Eric, if you'll, do that,
Yes,
and then we'll
ma'am.
put it on new business so that we can see it before we, rather
Yes,
than
ma'am.
consent.
We will.
So, okay. Mr. Pointer, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Kinzer and Board. You should have, a copy in your packet of the, GMP for Hewlett Spencer for the athletic facilities. And of course, the maximum price not to exceed is $500,000. And so, if there are any questions, I will take those. You've all seen the budget, you've all seen the breakdown. I think we've talked about it 2 or 3 times now, as well as presented to the county commission.
You just wanted to give them they're saying a GMP, $500,000, not gonna exceed that.
Yes, ma'am.
We've authorized you to spend $500,000 and given you the choice,
Correct.
even though you pretty much outlined what you were gonna do.
Correct.
But if you find things other than that, excuse me.
What's the scope of work?
It's unchanged from the other times I passed out the information. It still aligns with exactly what I've passed out, so.
So all you want is for us to approve them as the GMP for it.
Correct, so that we can pull down from the PO, so it has to have those approvals.
Right. Mr. Sims.
So they've looked at the numbers that were compiled for each project, and they feel like they can use those numbers and complete the projects with those numbers.
Correct.
Any discussion? What? No? Okay. Then, can I put it on consent? All right. All right, I believe we are now through with zoning and facility. Oh, don't you even think about it.
Y'all asked for it.
Okay.
We have the referendum document.
Oh, my gosh, I know. I'm sorry. I'm really bad about you jumping ahead.
This is the document that we were asked to develop. It's under, is it under policy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought I had it right there. Then I'll step out if y'all do.
No, it's right after, policies 3.5, this is 3.6.
Go ahead.
So, under new business.
It's under new business, right? Okay. But is that, you've got it right there?
Got it right here.
Let's go ahead and jump to it and get that out of the way.
And what Dr. Marzak asked me to do and to bring to you guys was just build a one-page summary, that kinda says this is where the referendum is, this is what it is. And if it passes, these are the action steps. And we talked with the county commission, talked to Scott Sumners, talked with Doug, at length about how this would work if this passes. And basically, we came up with just a clear, concise pattern of what you guys would do. One is you approve the projects that you wish to move forward with, you give them that price, and then you can see there, we just outlined it, the actions and then also the funding and the timeline. One thing that is important to note for you, and Jamie mentioned this, they can do their work in about 5 to 6 weeks to get you a GMP specifically on the McDowell project. The Spring Hill project's a little bit longer because it's not a finished project. Doug did say to me that the finance office would recommend to the commission that no funding go into place until the next year's budget is completed, so that they're not approving a spending package before they actually know what they have to spend for the county and for the school system for next year. So that puts us, according to his calculations, at funding being in place in a good budget year in about September. If we have a year where we run long, it could be much further than that. And then working with Jamie, you see on McDowell, that's about a 17-month project. Spring Hill High School would depend upon the scope at which you determine to land on, what you want done, and kind of the time frame that they could get all of that together. So that's if it passes. If the referendum fails, we came up, basically there are two options that internally we looked at. Of course, you have more options than that. You can do whatever you wish, but the two things that we looked at were you have a limited usage of that building in the future. It's not a 50-year building. It's on its downward spiral. We talked last month about some buildings are in year 1, some are in 48, and this one's way past that. So we have a limited use, and we have a plan. If you say we're gonna move forward and we're gonna live in that building, without building a new building, of things that we know we need to do, and over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, we're looking at about a $2.5 million to $3 million beyond the chiller of things that we have addressed some electricity, but we've not fixed it. There are things that we have to do to live in there. The other thing would be to discontinue use of the building. And if you do that, if you gave us that choice, we can discontinue as soon as you tell us. And we have a plan for, what that would take that we can bring to you when asked. And again, you have more options than those, but in a one-page document, those were the options that we saw that we could present.
Let me ask you a question. We're talking about the resolution.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So we don't have to make those decisions
You
now.
don't
We're just
have-
talking about a resolution
He
that we're
asked-
gonna have a call special about later.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
I was just asked to put a document together
Okay.
of what happens if.
All right.
What do we do either way? You can see we addressed Spring Hill High School at the bottom, and we gave you options basically too. You can rezone some students to Columbia. We figure that moving 150 to 200 students to Central buys you about 2 years before you need some sort of high school because of what I just mentioned earlier, all of the neighborhoods that are being built in Columbia proper, and you basically shift your capacity from Spring Hill High School to Central, create the same numbers south. The problem with Central is it's landlocked. You can't add kids without moving kids outward. The obvious kids to move would be the same ones that you just moved to it. If you leave them at Spring Hill High School, we estimate you've got about 2 years. So on Spring Hill High School, if you move kids, we estimate you've got about 2 years before you have to address a high school in some capacity, whether it's an expansion, whether it's a new one. If you leave them, we estimate you've got about 2 years until you have to do something one way or the other. So I was asked to give you this document that just says this is kind of the ifs and the buts. If you don't like it, we can start over.
No,
But this was the starting point of what I was asked to give you. So
I appreciate
go from
it.
there.
I think that you've done a great job in spelling out what will or won't happen based on the sales tax, and thankfully, there's a lot of information coming out in the newspaper and everywhere about the sales tax and how it will impact our school and how important it is. Dr. Marzad, do you want to speak to this, because I think this was somewhat of your baby?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. No, I mean, I think it's pretty much self-explainable, it's self-explanatory. We had conversations with Mr. Breeden before he left, we had conversations with Mr. Perriman now, so I think these recommendations from us are pretty absolute. These are pretty much the options that are available to us, so just wanted to bring this to the board, make sure you guys are okay with this. We'll vote on this right after the end of the work session to ratify that, yes, as a school board, we believe these are our options, and this is the information we'll share with the community.
So are we discussing this now or later? No. I mean, well, I guess we can talk about it, but I guess the fundamental problem I've had with the way this has been explained is that technically, the referendum doesn't cover any of this. It really just talks about funding on the county side. I mean, so when we talk about if this doesn't pass, we have to do this, technically that's not correct. What is correct is the county still has the option to figure out what to fund, whatever we send to them as a request. For example, in a couple of weeks when we do a capital request, we could choose not to send either one of these schools to the county as a capital request, and then they would not do anything with it. We could also choose to send them to them, and they could choose to fund them even if this doesn't pass. So that's been my problem all along with how this has kind of been worded, because the reality is this referendum is just the county's kind of the whatever bucket they're choosing to pull funds from. It really has nothing to do with the choices we make on what facilities we're going to repair, upgrade, or change. It really doesn't impact us on the school board side at all. We still are going to make the same fiscal and or decisions what's best for the kids by whatever we decide to do, and then it's still at the end of the day up to the county to fund that however they see fit or they choose to do. So I have a problem when we put out an infographic that kind of makes it seem like these are foregone conclusions, that if this doesn't pass, these schools won't be built. Now, while we've had county commissioners clearly say that, that would be their opinion, but as a body, they still have the obligation to decide when we send something to them if they are going to fund it or not, regardless of what this referendum does. So that's just been my issue all along, is how these have been kind of conflated and it's been kind of mixed up.
Mr. Fulbright.
I could just say ditto, because that was a lot of my points too. I do think if I had a kid in McDowell and this does not pass, I'm looking for the sky to start falling, because they're either gonna have to move to a new school or they're gonna have to be in a school that, is only a couple years left. There's no other choices. There's nothing else that could happen. The county can't come up with any other money. But in reality, 2 years ago, I believe it was, the county commission was in a position where they were convinced they were gonna have to raise property taxes, and there was no way around it. And then after a little bit of thought, a little bit of planning, lo and behold, they came up with a way to balance the budget without raising property taxes. So these things can get done, and I think that's why this is misleading in the way that it's put out. Not intentional. I think you're arguing a point. That's exactly what this is. It's arguing a point, and that's a point I don't want to argue. So that's where I'm coming down on this one.
So this came from the original discussion that happened as a result of the sales tax passing in Spring Hill. So when we met in this room, and the people in the room were all the county mayors, Doug Laconin, Betty, you were here, and we had the conversation around, would it be possible, since we're not receiving funding from the county, to do anything with McDowell or Spring Hill, is it possible for us to look at a potential sales tax referendum in order to fund those types of projects with all of the people that are coming in and shopping from the various communities that come here? So this this one-pager is being built upon those original discussions that we had in this room with locally elected officials and Doug Laconin, the county finance director. If we went in a different direction from that, then that would be contrary or opposite to what we went to the county commission to have a discussion about, with adding the referendum onto the presidential ballot to be able to pass the sales tax issue, if you will. And Ms. Kinzer, I may be off, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this one-pager goes in line with those original discussions.
Yeah. But it's still, I agree that it's ultimately up to the commission. Let's say it passes, they'll have the funds for debt service. It'll be on them. If we ask, they could still say no, that's right. But as far as a resolution is concerned, we just want to, I personally think I'd like to tell our constituents, yes, I want you to vote for this. Yes, it has ultimately the possibility that we'll be able to build more schools because they have an opportunity for debt service. I think that's all we're trying to do. And we're limited, are we not, Jake, in what we can do, the hatchet?
Correct. You can't do what you just said, what you told them that you want them to do.
Yeah, I know, okay.
So
well, they don't do what I say anyway.
Is what we're going for there.
Okay. Well, is it okay to pass a resolution like this?
I don't see this so much as a resolution as a fact sheet. this is the board, these are your options. So that's the reason I passed off on it. I think it explains to your constituents what your options, or what the board believes its options to be going forward. So that's what I believe.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Parker?
So I guess part of the issue that I have on this is, I think, Dr. Marzak, you talked about the meeting that went on here, but that wasn't a meeting of the school board recommending that we go to the county commission. I feel like at some point there should have been a resolution saying that we as a board need more funding and we're asking them to put this referendum on. I feel like that step got bypassed, and so I don't want to approve an infographic to kind of rectify that problem to me, especially because I think there's a lot of things that can change in a very short period of time. Obviously there's going to be a new election. I mean, there's going to be an election in August, and half of this board could potentially change. I don't know who's running for re-election. I don't know who's going to be re-elected. But I think to try to say try to make that board adhere to an infographic that we really haven't had that much time to look at or discuss as a board is just not something that I'm comfortable doing. And I'm very, I guess going back to when we start on the board, I am sensitive to the fact that the commission is responsible for taxing and we are responsible for spending those funds that they give to us. And our big thing that we usually get to deal with is rezoning. So if the money doesn't flow to us, then yes, we are probably going to have to look at rezoning issues. But I don't know that we should be stepping in and making any kind of statement with regards to how taxes, what the consequences of a tax referendum should be for this particular board.
Anyone else? Mr. Moore?
And I would agree with that. I mean, along the lines of, if this was just an infographic, what I would be looking for is explaining that, yes, a separate bucket of money that is allotted just, especially for maintenance of facilities, which we talked about, we have never truly budgeted for as a district. That's great. I mean, that's information that I think is helpful. Does it potentially impact Spring Hill High School or McDowell? Yes, but as Ms. Parker said, a lot of those things are variables at this point, depending on what we do or what the county commission does. And I have no problem putting something out as a district of saying how, if this were to pass, this could absolutely help us in creating an ongoing funding source that we can draw from to take care of things that are outside of the operational budget. And that's been one of the things as I've talked to people about this issue, that they get confused in the capital requests and the operational. And they want us to squeeze that operational. I'm like, well, that's fine, but it has nothing to do with the capital request. We could not possibly squeeze our operational budget enough to build a new high school, for example. It's just not possible ever. So, I mean, I have no problem if as a school district, we want to say, hey, were this to pass, here's the things that this could help us do. I think that's a good approach, and I think that is factual. It doesn't include any variables that are kind of up in the air. It just simply says if it's there, it can then help us by way of our funding body to be able to make sure that we have money set aside for maintenance and ongoing things and start to be able to fund the debt on some of these things. But ultimately, again, they chose, as a county commission, chose the wording of this resolution. I read through the notes of their meeting where they went through lengthy discussions of how exactly to word this to meet their needs. We really didn't get a lot of say in that. They voted on it, and at the end of the day, I'll go back to, again, this board is going to decide what capital request to send to them again that may or may not include what's on here. They are going to choose to fund, whether this passes or not, those items, whatever we send to them. And there's just a lot of variables that I just don't feel comfortable saying that this is what's going to happen if then, when we just don't know.
Well, maybe when we have the call special, we can reword it to be more in line with what you're saying. Is that possible?
No, it's on the agenda. I mean, you've given people notice of what's going to be discussed on the agenda. So yes, I think you could make changes to that. Yes, yeah, I think that'd be.
But I mean, that's what we're voting on, is approval of the infographic.
Correct, but you can amend that. I mean, you can make changes to that as you go.
Ms. Morency?
I guess my question is what purpose does our voting on this serve?
Again, careful,
can't-
careful with that.
So,
You're
yeah.
giving the community facts as to what would happen if they vote for, or what would they, if they vote against. Sorry, Chair, apologize.
But we really don't know the facts if they vote, if it doesn't pass. We don't know what would happen. 'Cause we don't control it. We have no control over what happens, or, I mean, we think that it would be really good for us, but we don't know that.
Can we not support the vote for, can we not make a statement in support of
No.
the tax? We can't do that?
Individually, I'd be fine with you doing that outside of the meeting.
Well, everything I've
but-
said is individually.
Yes, but, I mean, if we're talking about producing a document that the board ratifies that's gonna be produced on county taxpayer-funded paper and sent out, then you're getting really dangerously close there.
All right, let's move on then. We'll have is there other discussion here? Question? Mr. Philbach?
What you just said about being publicly printed, printed on taxpayer money and being public, isn't that what this exactly is?
I'm talking about a fact sheet, but if the question was, can we endorse a particular, position on that? Can we ask people to vote yes or no? And that's what I'm saying you can't do.
This is as close to saying yes as I've ever seen anybody put anything out.
Well, I mean, you're giving factual,
We're giving opinions on this, of what might happen, not facts.
well, you're giving a board's perspective. I mean, you're giving
Board's
your perspective as to what the board's gonna support one way or the other.
Okay, we think we see it a little different, but that's, we have no way of knowing if this is fact or not.
Move on then. And I know y'all gonna kill me because we've had a lengthy meeting, but I do have something I wanna give you. I'm next on the agenda, right? Huh? Candy. If I had candy, I'd send it right now. So take one of these and pass it around. I know that if you've been on the board with me the last almost 4 budget seasons, this is the 4th, that I have brought up beginning salaries over and over. One of the things in right sizing, one of the things in this proposal and in any of the salary issues is being able to recruit students. The Tennessean had an article on the critical shortage of teachers based on salary. How few are coming out of colleges, and it's all based on beginning salary, all of those things that play into it. Let me tell you, and I'll be quickly, especially, but you've heard it before. In the first line up there, look at those counties. They are green. That's their starting salary. That is way more than ours. We have the lowest starting salary of anybody in Middle Tennessee, but I just listed the starting salaries. The pay gap then as you see there, that's how much the difference in pay, actual in your hands pay is. But look at maximum salaries. We've always said we do great in the upper end. And once we get them, 10 years in, we have a good competitive salary, there. So it's red. We're better, than the other counties, other than Williamson County. What I wanna do is commit, and we can't make that decision because it's a budgeting decision, but we could resolve to say that we're gonna raise beginning $1,200. Now, when we do that, as you know, and I think the second sheet maybe shows you that in so doing it, there's the salary schedule. The first thing there it is, 36, and step 1 is 1758. If we take that 1,200 and put it up to beginning, then the people hired this year, the next year their step would be 558, which is in line with what most of the step raises are. The cost of doing that, based on how many students how many we have right now, and I've lost the piece of paper they had written on, that's really great. Teachers, 33 students right now, long meeting. 33 teachers is what we're looking at that will go to step 1. Can't say how many it would be next year, but the cost of that to do it, to change beginning would be a little more than $46,000. Okay, obviously if there's more, I think if we were to use the term maybe 40, then you're looking at maybe, you know, upwards of 60,000 to do it. But what a great step that we all of a sudden can jump up that much. Now, in order to get to 40,000, and that's obviously where we need to be because of those, look at these up here, look how close they are to 40. When they add the state raise to that, they'll be at 40. And then we're still gonna be behind. Then looking at this, in order to get a percentage of raise to get us to 40 and be competitive with the other counties, we would need a 6% increase. Now, I don't think that's excessive because we have not given our, the first year I was here, we gave a 3%. Then we gave a little, you know, $300, I think that next year. Last year we gave a 1%. And the cost of living up to last year was 4.5 that we did not give our employees. I don't know what it is right now, but I would say it's around 2%. So that's over 6% that they haven't gotten in order to just stay even. But I'm not going to debate that with you tonight. I just want us to make a commitment to tell Scott Lindsey as he goes out that our beginning will be no less than $38,039. And that's just by moving the $1,200 to that. Ms. Morency.
So if we move the $1,200, the total cost would be $46,000, is that what you're saying?
That's but based on what we had now. I've got it written down somewhere and I can't find it.
Well, we should know how many first-year teachers, because that's all it's gonna affect, right?
Well, we had 0 this year, 33. Okay, but we don't know how many we're gonna hire.
Yeah, but you'd be hiring them at the 38.
At the 33 positions, well, you may have some.
No, what I'm saying, we would be hiring new teachers at the 38,000.
Yes, we'd be hiring at 38, right.
So.
But the next year, they wouldn't get the $1,700 jump.
No, they would get the 550. So
Right.
they're getting the largest in there.
So there's no extra cost the next year. The extra cost it would be now.
And so we should know how many first-year teachers we have, so we should have the exact cost of what it would cost us to do it.
Right, but it's at 0, it's those we hire. So we've never hired more than 40. 0 is that, we're talking about the teacher that comes in for day one, they've never taught a day. Right now, we're moving 33 up to step 1, okay? So we know we're gonna probably have to hire 33 positions. It may be some more, I'm just saying it may be more than that. I just feel like that we need to give Scott Lindsey, I mean, it's a crisis we're in. You're talking about wanting level 4 and 5 teachers. How are you gonna attract them? You know, how are you gonna attract them if we're not willing to pay for them? Yes, we have good benefits, but all the other counties have started coming up in benefits as well. The actual figure is 33 times 14, 16, that's the cost with benefits, is $46,728. If all we do is replace those 33 teachers. Yes, sir, Mr. Moore.
Okay. I'm still not bought into this, just to say it up front. I know there's a national teacher shortage, and I'm not sure that us upping our first-year pay is gonna all of a sudden change that. I mean, that's a demographic that I've seen records on and reports on across the nation. So I'm not sure that one little number is gonna move it. But that said, I mean, I guess
we've got to start
for several
somewhere.
years. Well, I understand we've got to start somewhere, and I would be willing to talk about looking at other areas. But again, so I guess I'll say this out of pure ignorance. How do I know I'm getting a great teacher if I'm hiring a first-year teacher?
You
And what am I actually
absolutely
getting?
do not.
Okay.
You don't.
So my next question with that would be, at what rate are we non-renewing teachers? Or are we not keeping them? Or do we have a track, because currently, from what I understand, we don't have a very good track record of taking care of that business to make sure that if we do have a bad hire, are we pushing them on out the door before they stick around and do a bunch of damage? Because historically, we haven't done a very good job of that.
According to this article, teachers are not lasting but 3 to 4 years because the salary and benefits. That they may come out of college, take a teaching job, but they're not staying with it. The programs have just, the graduates are just not coming, and it's because of salary and benefits.
Okay.
And maybe classroom, who knows, it may be a lot of things.
Sure.
But, I think you gotta start somewhere. If you're not willing to start there, then you're gonna have to start with increasing salaries, some way.
I mean, I'm willing to talk about any number of those things. I guess I just have never been, especially, granted, the person that was giving us these answers is not here anymore, but when she was talking to us before, we were saying that, as we talked with people, we're bringing them on, that first-year salary just wasn't what we were getting turned down for as far as the reason people weren't choosing us. And that's what we'd been told in previous meetings. Again, whether that's true or not, I don't know, I don't see the information. But I do know that that's what we had been told previously. So that's where I have trouble. And it's not that I don't want to look at something, but I'm just not sure this is the one where we're actually getting an impact out of, especially when we're not addressing what are we doing when we do bring a teacher on that's a first-year teacher and they're just not that good.
Well, they shouldn't be, that's a conversation that the principal needs to have and all. I don't think that's what this is about. You gotta get them in the door. You gotta recruit the best and the brightest. Obviously, the other counties are feeling that this is pretty important because they've surpassed us in every category other than the upper. I mean, we take care of them once they're here. Salaries are good. But I think there's just been a history of just not addressing the fact that we need to recruit teachers. We are competing with the county next door that has a bigger revenue source. Obviously, I don't know that we can compete with that at some point. But then you talk about the growth and you talk about building new schools and, we want the best and the brightest teachers.
And I agree with that.
A living wage, $36,000 is not a
Well, I mean,
living wage.
I agree with that. But again, I'm gonna come into, if we wanna attract the best and brightest, why are we not looking at approaches that actually attract the best and brightest? I mean, I'm not sure that just raising the starting wage just to get somebody for an extra $1,200 to come in here is targeting what we're saying we wanna target. That's simply gonna bring someone who wants some more money. I'm not sure that necessarily, and again, my point is if we wanna attract the best and brightest, why aren't we looking at approaches that are actually gonna attract the best and brightest?
Well, I think we
and
need to
target
look at
that.
all that. I think we need to do everything that's necessary.
Well, again,
This is a pretty inexpensive way.
well, it may be
for
inexpensive,
Scott
but
to
again,
go
I'm not
out
sure it's
and
actually
recruit.
addressing what we're saying we want.
Yeah, well,
It's simply gonna bring someone in the door. I'm not sure that necessarily, and it may not even do that, to be honest. Again, we've got a national teacher shortage. We've got article after article saying that it's an issue, even in counties, and I've talked to people in other counties that pay more, and they're still having the same issue we are. So I'm just not sure it moves the needle. Especially doesn't move the needle where we say we wanna move it.
how do you feel about, teacher raises? Mr. Moore?
Why am I on the spot here?
Well, you're talking about moving the needle. Salary's got to be a big part of that.
No. I don't think it's as big a part of that as we're talking about. I know we've talked in the past about hiring bonuses, about actually recruiting people.
And
that, to me, seems like a targeted approach that actually starts to look at bringing in the people we want here, not just casting a big net and hoping we catch a few, which seems to be what just upping the salary or salary ranges would be.
It is amazing to me that we're not trying every way in the world to get ourselves competitive, at least the small little surrounding counties. That we're not trying to say to Giles and Marshall and all those counties, we've got a better system and we're looking for the best and we're gonna take them from you. We want them to come to us. We have benefits, we have, this and that. I just can't imagine that we wouldn't do whatever was necessary to recruit students and to give our HR person the opportunity to go out and sit next to people that are offering more beginning. I know when the young people come out of college, they want to be able to pay their rent, pay their car payment. They're not looking at the long term. And then they get into it, can't pay their rent, and they leave. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think as a board, if we're not thinking about taking care of our employees and trying to recruit those teachers that'll be here for the long term, that we're making a big mistake. Yes, sir.
But isn't that what we are doing? If we're paying teachers that have 5 to 10 years experience more than surrounding counties, that says we want those teachers that have a proven track record. We want the good ones. It's a crapshoot. If you get a new teacher, they may be here a year or 2 or 3 by your article, and they're gone. So I would rather have a proven track record of someone who is a 4 and a 5. And
do you think they're coming here because they saying, I'm going to go to Murray County and teach 4 or 5 years because I might make more money than somebody down the road? We got to get them in the door. You know,
but like he said, I mean, we're literally could be just wasting that money. I would rather increase proven track record, so we know that we are buying a winner. We're not.
How do you do that?
You increase the pay for the ones that are 5 and 10 years. So we know that we're getting good experience.
You increase the pay of the 5 and 10 years, and how are you going to get somebody to that? I don't understand.
Because they've already been a teacher. This isn't just necessarily that they've come here from zero.
I understand that they'll make more money.
You've been a teacher in Giles County for 10 years, and you say, well, I can go to Murray County and make $10,000 more. Would you not go to Murray County as a 10-year teacher to make $10,000 more? Or I'm making that up.
Well, the reality is everybody's having trouble finding teachers. That's the reality. They're just not coming anybody's way. I just think as a board we need to look at it and you know, the discussion about raise, all of that. We've had teachers, we put them through a lot the last 3 years. We have put them through a lot. Things that we hadn't had control over.
But this doesn't affect them.
It doesn't affect them. The raise does.
No, we're not
right.
talking raise right now, we're talking this $1,200.
No, the $1,200 it's an inexpensive fix to say that our beginning is better, and that if we give them the raise that they deserve, it would be at $40,000 and be competitive. Huh? It's all it is a lot of ifs. It always is a lot of ifs. But anyway, this may be my last discussion of this if you are not willing to do this. But I will ask Doug to put it in the budget, and you all can vote it out or in or whatever you want to do, if that's okay.
I just want to say that is true though about doing something and making sure we take care of our teachers, because if we think about it, you know, those teachers may be on the small end of or financially of all the professions, but every profession in the world it happened because of a teacher. And we don't look at it sometimes that way, but a doctor had to have a teacher, a lawyer had to have a teacher. Every profession in the whole world started with a teacher. And so we have to, you know, do, like you said, do something. Don't know what the answer may be, but do something.
It may be a combination of things.
Combination.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Parker.
I would just say, if you want to put it on the agenda, I'm not opposed to you putting it on the agenda, but I don't want to give folks out there the idea that we're opposed to this as being a possible solution. I just think maybe we want to explore a bigger picture before we
I would not
vote on
put
one
it
thing.
on the agenda, but I will
Okay.
ask Doug to put it in the budget.
Into the budget discussion.
And, you know, I think my thinking was that they'll start recruiting teachers in April, and, you know, just trying to give Scott some more tools, just like the right sizing and what
Right.
class size and that's all it is, if it's not possible.
Well, the other question I would have is Mr. Lindsay still interim, or when does that?
As far as I know. I think we'd have to budget him to be permanent, wouldn't we?
Since we had pretty much a failed search in the fall, he is interim, and we would look to open the job again this spring. And he's welcome to apply if he wants to, but we would go back through the process of reposting the job towards the end of the school year, when most school systems post jobs.
Ms. Morency?
When you say that you're gonna ask Doug to put it in the budget,
Like I did last year, and you already approved
You mean actually in the budget that they present to us? Well, I guess my question is, why wouldn't the board vote on that? And I'm not saying one way or the other, but it just seems like, so I can request him to put something in the budget? Alright.
I mean, I would agree functionally, I'd rather have the board kind of decide if we're gonna put line items in the budget for that.
All right. It was because last year, and I, either way, it doesn't matter to me. I probably am misspoken on that, but it was in a line item. Do you remember? As we had modified, we had Battle Creek and we had so many different scenarios and all, and we ended up with none of those. None of those scenarios other than Battle Creek, so, one of them, huh? And 1%. And, yeah, and it wasn't in a line item. There was another line item, wasn't it, for the extra positions that the, study came up with, that was in a line item as well, so, I'm sure we'll have to look at all of it, but no, I won't do that then.
Okay, Chair Kinzer, I just wanna say, I mean, I can appreciate where you're going with trying to, cause this falls in line with what we've talked about, of being able to project ahead for these things. I've always said for years that I wanna start looking at projecting ahead money that's allotted specifically for maintenance of our facilities, that we make sure we're taking care of technology. And I agree with you that in theory, we should be looking at not putting it on the end, we should be looking at a process where it's kind of accounted for on the front end of the budgeting process. I think the problem we have right now, and we've had for the last 2 years, is just financially, we're in a tight spot. And we're in a tight spot with a funding body that has been kind of hot and cold on how they want to approach these things. So maybe, I agree with the goal that we should be getting there, but it's just, for me, it's hard with some of these other variables that are up in the air to get to a point where we can just on the front end say, we're gonna account for a percentage of a raise every year, and that's our starting point. I'm just not sure this year is the year we can start doing that.
Well, you know, another thing that's concerned me is that there's nowhere in our strategic plan that addresses teachers or staff or anything to do with it. There's nothing. If you look at a strategic plan in any system, and I've looked it up, Knoxville for one is one that I was really impressed with how they address teacher, where they want to be, address it. It's not part of our strategic plan, but it's 87% of our budget. And it's what our kids learn from, and it's what the scores, we're all about scores. We want those people that are going to come, get their masters, stay with us, be those level 4 and 5 teachers. But we got to attract them. We do.
So I will say the difficult thing, so how do we reconcile when our scores are not where they want them to be? And tie that back into our staff and how that balances out. I mean, I know nobody wants to talk about that. It's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but how do you talk about raises and increasing pay and making things better when maybe we're not getting the results we feel like we should be getting either? I mean, I think it's a difficult discussion, but it's probably something we should be talking about as well, because it's a two-sided equation.
Do you think that possibly because there's a difficulty, a good example is all we heard about algebra at Withorn. They posted that job all summer. They finally got an applicant. Okay. They got one applicant. Okay. And we all know that there's been issues about that. So they didn't, the problem is finding those teachers to come in, and a principal's job is to evaluate those teachers, and if they've got a teacher that is a 1 and 2, I mean, they shouldn't be rehired. But if there's nobody to do, you don't want to, sometimes it's better to have somebody who's trying than a substitute who's doing nothing. And I don't think that's a good thing at all. I don't mean that. But I think if you can't find that position, and you've got kids that need a class. I had a person tell me that her child is a retired teacher is taking an interim for the ELA teacher at Withorn, and it's the best teacher they've ever had. but they had to find somebody to take that interim. They just.
No, I mean, I agree, these are tough things. Some other pieces we've talked about was the snowball effect when we have an opening at one school and we let it be filled by someone from another school, which creates an opening there, and we've done that daisy chain problem. I mean, I think this discussion is probably broader, much broader than just, are we raising $1,200 for starting pay? I mean, there's, like I said, looking at all these pieces that kind of, I think, work together and creating a good working environment, but at the same time, creating a good educational environment, which is, again, at the end of the day, the most important thing here. I appreciate our staff and teachers, but we are here for the kids.
I absolutely agree, but this is to begin the discussion. We're gonna have a lot of discussion about budget, needs, all of that sort of thing. But this is to begin the discussion, is where do we wanna get as a board? Where do we want to find those, teachers and what do we wanna tell our teachers in order to keep them? So that they don't have another 3 years like they've had, as far as their payroll and all of those sort of things. I mean, whatever happened with Doug and it's unfortunate, it was a human error. He's handled it the best way he could, but it's still just another notch in the issues that the teachers have faced. Okay, we'll move on. I don't even know where we are. Low bids, 4.1,
I would ask that 4.1, 4.2, 4.4 all be sent to consent unless anybody has any questions.
okay. But not 4.3.
Well, I thought we had to talk about that.
What am I, 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3? Where is 4.4?
It's the rename the baseball field.
Oh, okay. This is scary. 4.4. I am on the second page here at operations bids, so you're saying it's consent for that. TNSRO conference, that's consent? Yes. So we're ready for 3 payment of TSB for superintendent search, and I added that to the call special, but so that we can get a budget amendment on that as well. Mr. Moore?
I know I brought something up when we talked about this. The number was 11.6, I guess?
11.5.
11.5, I'm sorry. Do we need to attach a specific dollar figure to this? And I say that because, and it looks like it may not be any additional cost.
I think he'll want a budget amendment, he'll have to have a budget amendment about it, whatever we do.
I just want to know what anybody else's thoughts. I know I brought this up the other day at the work session for this. I just want to make sure, in case there were any additional costs, advertising costs, anything else that we chose to do maybe above and beyond what the search is, I just want to make sure we have enough money. If we're going to ask for this, ask for it one time and not be coming back and have to find money somewhere else.
Well, I think, Mr. Philbin,
Well, I was just gonna say, can we do a do not exceed amount?
not to exceed that, yeah, let's
Whatever,
do that.
whatever, I don't even know what our comfortable range would be.
Honestly, at this point, I don't know of any other, but I would rather have it, and whatever we wouldn't use would go back into fund balance as well. We could use a figure of 14,000, maybe that'd be 15,000, okay. And Ms. Parker had asked for us to look at our budget to see if there were any areas, which I think I sent to you all, it's kind of picking and choosing and this, that, and the other. I would recommend that we take it out of fund balance. It's a one-time issue. Whatever we don't spend beyond 11,500 will go back into fund balance as well. So, we'll make the motion at the call special. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, I would rather take it out of fund balance a one-time, and because if we start picking from other lines, if we don't spend in those lines, it's gonna go into fund balance anyway.
Absolutely.
So
I think we looked at our budget,
yes.
But anyway, I prefer that as well, and we did take a look at it. So we will.
A motion to ask for an up to $15,000 from fund balance to go towards the superintendent search.
Okay, so we'll have that into our call special in just a few minutes. Okay, then, so it's item 4, request the name change, for the baseball field at Mount Pleasant High School. I actually taught with him, or no, I knew him as a student.
I was, presented from Mount Pleasant High School and other community leaders about naming the baseball field, after Coach Eddie Basham. We have a stipulation, I guess it's a policy or some sort of protocol that we follow that says that somebody needs to be retired for 5 years before we do naming. The reason this kinda got a little tricky is because Coach Basham actually came back kinda as an employee, but only as a coach after he retired. He stepped up in a big way last year when the individual who was supposed to be the coach kind of backed out 2 weeks prior to the season. So, Mr. Hughes, reached out to Coach Basham. Coach Basham was more than gracious to step up. And so they came to me this year and thought it was something fitting for him. And you have his statistics in your email, and I can go over those if I need to. But just very fitting for the work that he's done, and his commitment to Mount Pleasant High School baseball, and to that community. And I, for one, wholeheartedly support the naming of that baseball field after him.
I said, Mr. Moore.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I have not looked at policy, 'cause this, I believe, falls under the new policy we did under naming. I don't think it was 5 years of retirement. I thought it was, 5 years after death.
What, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what we had. I know we can waive policy for most of these things, but, go ahead.
That's the recommendation down below. Requesting the waiver of the policy that school personnel must have been retired for 5 years before consideration.
So then so whatever I was looking at was wrong, whatever I pulled from versus the new one. Either way, I think we still should look at trying to waive that policy. 'Cause I believe in giving people their flowers while they're alive versus when they're dead.
My next question is, what costs are associated with this?
The school's gonna cover all the costs to purchase the sign, to put on the field, to name it after him. So there's no cost on our behalf.
Ms. Marisi?
I also wanna say that he raised the money to build the field. I mean, it's not, it's another one of those things, they didn't come to the school district and say, we need a field. They actually got out, they raised the money, and he was the coach and raised the money to build the field.
Mr. Beaver?
Well, I think we might be fixing to open up another can of worms, because I think it was, a school principal, right, that her husband came and asked this same scenario, and we turned it down, So if we change the policy now, or waiver the policy, what are we gonna get into here in the near future?
And I understand that. I think we just may need to possibly put this on the agenda for further conversation. However, I will say this. We may need to put criteria and stipulation around the naming of certain fields. Because when you look at a coach's track record or tenure and a person who has given this level of life to a program, I think those types of things need to be taken into consideration. We don't have very many of those across the district, because we kinda have a turnover. They may be here 5 years and then they're gone, but then we do have some cases where there are some very successful winning programs that we should take in consideration. Whether it's a longer time after they retire, I'm not 100%, well, I'm not at all behind naming something after they're dead. I don't know, there's probably a rationale for that, but I do believe in the flowers while they're still alive. Now, they could be 97 and barely moving around, or however we decide to do it, but for a person to be able to see the support of a community that they gave so much to, and to be able to see that reciprocated back, I think that's very important. However we elect to decide to do that, or however the board decides to do it moving forward.
I just want to clarify, I was wrong. It is retirement, it's 5 years. And by the way, it's board policy 3.210. And if this does end up on the agenda, we probably should go ahead and have because we are setting aside board policy, we should probably have a copy of that policy included with this so that everybody understands that that's what we would be doing.
And the thing about Coach Basham is that he has been retired. He just came back as an employee as a coach. And so that's where we wanted to make sure we did not overstep our boundaries in the verification of that.
Oh, sorry, but this would also, there is a entire procedure for how this is supposed to happen too, by the way.
Yes.
There is a meeting
Yes,
when it's supposed to happen and all the rest of that. So you may wanna, if this wants to be brought to us, I mean, there is actually a process for it. You may wanna read that policy and see if we're following that.
Jenny, what you were talking about, they want to change the name of the school. It wasn't that they were naming a portion of the school, they wanted to change the whole name of the school, so it's a little different circumstances.
Wave and pause.
All right, yes.
If we're done with this, before we move on, I had something to inform the board about 3.8, but that can wait until this is over with.
Okay,
I'll just cover one thing. I would prefer not to set aside board policy. There is a procedure in here. I would prefer that if the name change is being requested, we just go through policy. There is a process for it. So we should just go through that and we can just take a vote on it if it meets the requirements.
So you bring it back to us.
All right, I'll do that.
All right, thank you. Dr. Marzak?
Okay, sorry, yes, according to board policy 1.807, you have to vote to revoke the use of the name for Inspiring Minds Academy. You leave the resignation of allowing an organization to use the logo or school system information upon the superintendent of schools. But you do have the right to reserve, the board reserves the right to revoke the use of the name of the school system or an individual school at any time. So I think it does need to be voted on at the board meeting.
What does?
If you guys do not want to allow Inspiring Minds to use the logo,
Okay.
you have to vote.
Okay,
So it needs to stay on the agenda, please.
okay, we can do that.
All right, thank you.
Next on the agenda, last on the agenda before we have another meeting, is the, throwing away, and reusable trays. And what?
We were asked last month to bring this information to you, so Mr. Parkhurst came tonight just to kinda give you the overview of why they're doing what they're doing. And I guess I would just lead with, he gave you a document, do you have questions of him? 'Cause I think it was pretty self-explanatory.
No, we're just really glad to see you. If you sat through all this, we should give you.
How do you do that?
I'm just that good.
Are there any questions of him at this time? I'm having trouble loading the documents, so. All of us are, so.
I did try to keep it straightforward, to try to not dig too deep for y'all to where
All right, are we okay with consent once this loads?
it's
Don't have
more
to do
just
anything,
information.
it's an FYI, okay. All right, thank you. Well, bless your heart, thank you for coming. Is there anything else then? All right, do you all need a break, or do you want to get right into it and then we can go home? Huh? Get it over with, Mr. Beaver said. All right. I'm gonna call the meeting to order, and the first order of business, let's get your computers up and running. Let me change, go to a new meeting. No. Yes, it is. Is it working?
No, they've not given me any.
Hmm. It's on there too. It's the second thing. Huh? Yeah, I'm just going by the agenda. Okay, the first order of business is, just a pass-fail on, to ratify the sales tax infographic. Is there a motion for discussion? Okay, seeing no motion, then we will go on. TSBA payment and other costs for the superintendent search. Is there a motion?
Can we have a motion to approve, pulling up to $15,000 for the superintendent search?
From?
Not to exceed 15,000 from fund balance.
All right.
Sorry, thank you.
Motion is not to exceed $15,000 to be, to use fund balance for that, for the superintendent search. Is there a second? Okay. Mr. Fulbright, I saw first. Any discussion? All those, I'll just take a voice vote here. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, then, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Sign in sheets are over here, right? Yeah, everybody sign in, or you don't get what we still get.